Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Hoster Tully sits tiredly on the river chair, the official seat of the Lord of the Riverlands, located at the center of the dining hall of Riverrun. It is a simple chair designed to accommodate to the comforts of the current lord, unlike that monstrosity of a chair that is called the Iron Throne. There is even spacing pre-prepared by its original makers where cushions can be placed to accommodate the back and the ass. A footstool is also glued on it in order for its occupant to place their legs into and reduce the stress on the knees. Despite the comforts of the river chair, however, it does little to lessen the tiredness of Hoster Tully. As usual, the pain of his old wounds weighs him down. Add that to his already advancing age, and it is all he can do sometimes to walk down from his solar. Already, he is using a room on the main floor in order to have access to the welcome hall where matters of the Riverlands are being discussed. Normally, it should have been Edmure's purpose and responsibility running the Riverlands for this harvest feast. However, once more, the boy proved incompetent as he overpriced almost everything of the food, insulted a lot of the servants by wrong wages, made mistakes on the delivery, and alienated the guards by the rather unfair scheduling of their duties. Worse, he worded the names of the lords of Riverrun wrongly, nearly causing a cascade of angry lords marching to Riverrun in protest, wondering if the current heir is making fun of them. Thankfully, Maester Olga managed to get wind of it and informed him of the rather large amount of blunders. This prompted Hoster to rise from his bed and kicked out his incompetent son while he did damage repair to his work before managing the affairs of the harvest feast himself, despite his ailing body. Currently, his son is once more gone with the other young boys, hunting, making Hoster scowl on his morning porridge. He should be here with him, greeting the other lords and learning. Instead, he is once more wasting the opportunities being provided for him. It might have been different if Lyanna's here. That girl may be a bastard, but never let it be said that she is incompetent. The girl had run the Riverlands properly, and at a very young age at that. However, she was a bastard and a threat to Edmure's future as long as she was here. Until now, Hoster can't fully remember the reason why he gave her the Tully name. Pity that she is born a bastard, else she might have earned Riverrun by competence alone. Still, she is my daughter, and I've heard good things about her. Work being as heir of Harrenhal. Hoster thinks to himself, watching the first of the arriving lords enter the hall and approaching the high table to greet him. He sighs once more as he straightens his rickety back. Once more the dance of pleasantries must start, and he is once more devoid of his rest. Where's Edmure when you need him? He mentally moans as Lord Mallister approaches him with that ever-mocking smile of his that never fails to remind Hoster of how much a rival to his house the damned sea-loving fools are. And the prices for this upcoming order of wine barrels. Seriously, Robert, why in the world did you order this much wine for your personal use? Robert, are you listening to me? Robert Baratheon, King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, grunted in automatic agreement to Jon Arryn's tirade like an annoyed bear in his wine-hazed mind in his bedroom. Gods, at least bears have more interesting lives than I do. He groans inwardly as he nods and grunts to the chastisement that the Lord of the Vale is giving him. As usual, Jon is giving him the usual rundown about his vices and why he should stop. Robert grunts at that. It's as if he has anything better to do than his vices. Stuck in a castle and unable to roam far without the entire realm squawking about his whereabouts. Married to a shrew of a woman who's more viper than lioness. She guards her cunt so strongly that it never fails to amaze Robert. If he's not in a drunken stupor, how he sired 3 children with the damn woman. Worst of all, it is always responsibility. Responsibility that he is nearly going deaf hearing it. It is more Ned's thing, duty and responsibility, not his. All he'd ever wanted in this world was to be free. Married to Lyanna, riding with her, giving her that freedom that she'd always wanted, maybe sail the world with her. They'll have marvelous children, stag and wolf blood bound together, as fierce and wild as both. Now all he has for children is one spoiled brat, one spare whom he barely knows, and his beautiful princess. Golden-haired and beautiful as their mother, Lannister shits. At least this way stuck in his vices. He can still dream bashing Rhaegar's chest for ruining not only his intended but also his life. Your Grace, a letter arrived by Raven from the Crownlands. Jon's voice cut through his foggy brain like a knife. It says that Price's Myrcella's escort have passed on towards Riverrun. They'll be on time for the harvest feast there, Your Grace. What? Good, good, that's very good. Robert murmurs more to himself as he crashes on the bed sheets, feeling sleepy. He'll be the first to admit that he failed as a father to his children. Joffrey is a little shit that needs a good beating. Tommen needs to man up and be aware of his responsibilities as a prince instead of hiding behind his father's skirts, and Myrcella needs to be protected. He loves them, he really do. However, for some reason, he can't put the effort on showing them. The reason Myrcella is off to the Riverlands, though, is a rare moment of Robert in a moment of clarity, putting his fatherly responsibility on the works. Cersei might have gotten her claws on Joffrey and Tommen, but Myrcella, the princess who seems to have a spine out of his 3 children, despite hiding it from her mother, is still her very own person. Thus, after Joffrey's name day, where as usual she brings her precious golden lion to Casterly Rock for the festivities, and leaving behind her 2 other children, Robert acted. Tommen, of course, would be tutored by Jaime Lannister, since the young kid is likely to be the next Lord of Casterly Rock. Tywin Lannister would not have it that anyone else be the kid's protector and teacher. This left Myrcella alone, usually. Robert, of course, like anyone else, heard about the infamous bastard daughter of Hoster Tully, who went to Old Town and literally put the smackdown on the maesters there. And she went to Riverlands and, for a time, acted as regent of Hoster Tully as Lord Paramount due to his illness. Rumors were the lords of the Riverlands preferred the bastard over the enthusiastic fool that is Edmure Tully. Then she goes off to live on the ruins of Harrenhal and became its future lady. Not only did she manage to gain the loyalty of the small folk of the castle, but even improve their lives, and she did that while 6 name days old. As far as Robert was concerned, anyone that not only survived Harrenhal but even improve it was good in his book. Thus, the reason why he sent his only daughter there. As a warrior, Robert had seen the horrors of war. He can personally attest to the fact that the prayers and courtesy of women not work on the real world. They need to be strong, to be able to use their minds and hands in any way possible, if only to survive. He had fought alongside the Mormonts of the North, and he respected their warrior women. He had considered sending his daughter there, but constant raiding from pirates and the occasional willful Ironborn made him reconsider. In the end, he chose to send her to Hoster Tully's legitimized bastard daughter. Her reputation, after all, spoke volumes of her. Myrcella can learn a lot there from her, despite his personal dislike for Hoster Tully, for not allowing Ned and Jon through the Riverlands, if not for them marrying her daughters first. It would be safe enough, and the young legitimized bastard was not aligned personally with the other schemes of the great houses, due to her status. Robert, personally, had a soft spot for bastards since he had so many. In any way, he hoped that, other than learning, she might gain a friend there. Goodness, only knows how lonely she might be here under the suffocating care of her mother. Robert can attest to that experience personally. Robert, are you listening to me? We need to talk about the payment for your order of liquors. Robert, listen. Robert groans as he tries to bury his head and block Jon's voice off. Where's the wine when you need it? Chill. Before you read, I changed the age of Myrcella Baratheon. Instead of the tender age he is at the show and the books, here I increased her age at 6. She is also the firstborn of Robert and Cersei, though her paternal father is still Jaime Lannister. She will play a large part in this story, that's why I changed her age a bit. Myrcella Baratheon nervously fidgets on her chair as she watches the proceedings below. The 6-year-old is glad that she has the reassuring presence of Sir Aerys Oakheart at her side. The stern but silent Kingsguard is a silent shadow that has glued to her hip the moment they stepped out of the capital. Myrcella actually never expected to be going on this trip. All her life, she had been cooped on the Red Keep due to her status as a princess. It might have been a comfortable life if not for Joffrey. Despite being a year older than him, the heir to the throne is a monster in human's clothing as far as Myrcella is concerned. He takes great pleasure in bullying her, and Timon especially. More than enough of Timon's cats were killed due to his cruelty, resulting to her younger sibling being heartbroken. More than once, he would also fire crossbow bolts at her head if he's feeling particularly vindictive, or at her skirt grazing more than once. Her skin and scalp, sure he never fires to hit her, but he takes pleasure seeing her run away holding her bleeding wounds. Before she had hoped that her father and mother might intervene, that hope dashed away in her early years when she realized that her mother, despite professing fair undying love to the 3 of them, doted and cared for Joffrey compared to her and Tommen. She's got a feeling that anything short of murder in front of an entire crowd would make her mother believe, even then, she will try to cover it up. Her father, on the other hand, the less said about her father's vices, the better. Still, she's thankful. He sent her here in an effort to learn more about the kingdoms he is ruling. Sure, she might not be the crown heiress, but she would be a lady of a great house soon. Princesses are usually wed to heirs. Myrcella would try her best not to shame the royal court or her family. Now here she is sitting at the high table, together with the aging Lord Tully at his right, while his heir, Edmure, at his left, is busy flirting with the maid. Down below the river lords, a combination of men in silk and robes that made up the ruling of the Riverlands are laughing and talking as they partake in the feast. The loudest of them all, and who seems to be trying to make the others listen to him, is an old man with a weasel-like face. With him are almost a dozen other younger-looking weasel lookalikes. Ceres must have seen her eye's attention, for he leads towards the side of her head. That's Walder Frey, Lord of the Twins. His house, alongside the Mallisters, continue to be a challenge for the Tullahs as Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Nasty sort of people, Your Highness. Myrcella simply hums in response. An hour before, all these lords had been approaching her, welcoming her to the Riverlands, and repeating how such of an honor it is to host her. Nothing made her skin crawl than old Walder Frey, as he did a mock representation of a kiss at her palm. She had deftly washed it immediately, the moment no one was looking. All in all, it is a pretty good day for Myrcella. She maintained her composure despite being jittery at first. It's her first time to be dealing with Lords of the Realm after all. Ceres had tutored her, however, all the way here, making her more than ready. All she had done is being polite to them, and they returned the favor in kind. Of course, she knew that normally visiting princesses will be sought out by eligible young heirs and bachelors. However, at her tender age, there seems to be none that is interested at the moment. Suffice it to say, in her opinion, this surely beats staying at the Red Keep alone. However, there is one thing that she has been missing to see, what her father specifically told her to look for during her time here. "Pardon my disturbance, my lord," she says to the eating Hoster Tully, who looks at her direction. "I have heard that you have another daughter at your old age. I have been expecting to meet her. Is she not present?" "My apologies, Your Highness. Last I heard, my daughter is also on the way here." "The muddy roads might have held her up. It is not unusual for an attending dignitary to be sometimes late in a harvest feast," he replies, a bit nervously looking at the door as if willing his daughter to appear. "Of course. My apologies for disturbing your meal, my lord," Myrcella politely replies. It is not surprising. Her visit to the feast is a bit of an impromptu decision that no one expects. If they had known, she knows that they would be here hours early to greet her. Still, she is both curious to meet Lord Tully's daughter. Her father told her about the former bastard's deeds before she left. She is both enthralled and amazed at the story of her father. A beautiful bastard that climbed her way from the stigma that is her name and became a lady of her own right. Not only is she the future lady of her own castle, she became the first woman to enter the Citadel and beat the maesters of their own game. What she has is freedom, something that Myrcella does not have. She can make her own choices, with her taking full account of the consequences. Compared to her, Myrcella is a pretty doll stuck at the Red Keep as an ornament, and later as a present for any of her suitors who is deemed right by her family. She can still remember clear as day the words of her father, though, when he informed her of his decision to send her here. "Find this Lady Tully Myrcella. Learn from her, take as much time as you want. Ceres will protect you. The world is not a nice, comfortable place. My beautiful daughter, as a woman you will not have the strengths that men have. That means you must use the only thing that you can, your mind. As loath as I am to admit, it is the same strength your grandfather Lannister has, and see what he is now. Learn from this Tully Myrcella. Learn from her, and I expect good changes when you return." Myrcella has no idea what these changes her father meant, but she is determined that she would not disappoint him. Besides, she has every excuse to stay away from the Red Keep, and especially from Joffrey. Poor Tommen must endure him alone, now though. Myrcella, however, is already tired being fired at by a crossbow. The sound of the hallway doors opening, however, brings her out of her musings. It is not her alone, however. Every eye inside the hall stop whatever they are doing, as they turn their attention to the slender figure wearing a form-fitting leather outfit that hugs her curves and leaves nothing to the imagination. Pale pink hair with large streaks of red fell to her butt like a long mane. A pair of spectacles, only colored brown, cover her eyes, and when she removed them, shows the greenest eyes that Myrcella has ever seen. High-chinned and elfin features, she is the most beautiful woman Myrcella has ever seen, and the most daring and confident. A short sword is strapped at the small of her back, above her butt, designed in the most elaborate sheath of gold and black. She has seen a lot of different ladies at court, but no one come close to the one she is seeing right now. Her high-heeled black boots makes a clacking sound as she marches towards the high table of Riverrun, towards the shocked expressions of Halster and Edmure Tully. She looks like a young woman 14 name days. Despite originally being 6 years old, Myrcella knows exactly who she is. Only one family, after all, has that signature red hair that is well known in the Seven Kingdoms. Oh, father. Her melodic voice is both proud and strong as she stops a few steps before the stunned two Tullys. Sorry I'm late, I have to bring wagonfuls of gifts for everyone after all. The Cheshire grin with those red lips that greets the two is both mesmerizing and daunting. Myrcella decided there. And then about her opinion of Deliana Tully. I want to be the same as her. Castle of Harrenhal. Matthew yawns lazily on his tent as he fans himself to get rid of some of the mosquitoes that seem to be present at the swamps that surround Harrenhal. His workload has lessened tremendously ever since he niched his young second in command to be the one in charge of the creation of the hill that his employer is demanding. Of course, he still handles the logistics, but other than that, Ellie does the rest, and he is left to lounge lazily inside his personal tent. Sir, the familiar voice of his second-in-command brings him out of his stupor as he enters the tent where Matthew is sitting behind his desk. What can I do for you, Ellie? He asks the young man who regained his breath before talking. The personal gardeners of Lady Deliana is asking for the make of several long ladders, sir. They plan to plant something on the finished hillsides. Fine, but do not forget to foot the bill of materials and labor to them. Yes, sir, Ellie bows before walking off. Matthew yawns again as he returns to his beauty sleep. A hill with flowers, as far as he is concerned, is still an ugly hill after all. Do you swear upon this hall that you will serve the interests of Riverrun, to protect and defend it? I swear. Do you swear to care for the lands granted to you and the people entrusted there? I swear. Do you swear to be just and fair to your knights, to the minor lords that have swear allegiance to you? I swear. Do you swear for your fealty at House Tully as Lord Paramount of Riverrun, to uphold its laws and to answer as its bannerman when called upon? I swear. Then rise, my daughter, as Lady Tully of Harrenhal. May the Seven grant you wisdom, grace, and courage for you to rule over your lands, as our ancestors have done for 1,000 years. I, Lord Halster Tully, bear witness to this, and so do all the other lords here. A dozen and more throats, shouts in kind, followed by applause. Take the space, then, my daughter, Hoster Tully says, indicating the space in front of the high table. Deliana simply nods as she takes the center of attention. The applause is still ongoing, and she lets a smile appear on her face as she raises a hand and waves it at the watching lords and laddies. The smile she has, though, is anything but perfect. Looking down below at the cheering lords and ladies applauding her, it almost feels like one of her tours as Harry the Great back in her previous life. She doesn't need to use legilimency to know, however, that these peacocks are anything but honest about their praise. Half of them do not approve of her due to being a bastard, and the other half approves of her because she can be beneficial to them in one way or another. Either way, the only reason that they are even clapping for her is because she is a Tully by name, and because all of them are suck-ups to Lord Tully, who is watching. Still, it's nothing to worry about for her personally. When she's done with her plans, they would all stare at her the same way, but in awe and envy. Time to play the game, though. My lords, my ladies, she inclines her head to them. She does not bow. She never bows. I truly thank you for your support and for your presence this harvest feast. I swear I will do my utmost to serve the interests of House Tully and Riverrun as a whole. She mentally smirks. She can practically hear the grinding of teeth that Jason Mallister is doing. House Tully got a powerful supporter through her, of course. Time to dissuade him of that notion. I would also like to thank my father for his recognition of me, and so that of my brother who had graciously given me the chance to experience how it is to handle a castle of my own. She almost lost it, as she can practically feel the hostility emanating from Edmure for the reminder of how he neglected his duties as heir. On the other hand, the listening audience is terribly amused and satisfied. Almost all of them, after all, suffered from Edmure's mismanagement the second she left. She can feel some are disapproving of her, though, probably because she is a bastard insulting the rightful heir. Time to wrap this up. Long speeches never work well. That is all I have to say, my lords and ladies. As for my gratitude for attending this harvest feast and my ascension as Lady of Harrenhal and also as a member of House Tully, please do accept my gratitude. Raising her hands, Deliana claps twice. Immediately, a host of servants appeared, carrying platters of dishes that none of the attending lords had ever seen before. At first glance, it might have looked like a regular cooked chicken. The ones being placed at their tables, however, look bigger than any chicken they had been served. There's one that is colored a show-stopping cranberry orange with salt and some unknown herbs on it. Another that looks like regular cooked one, but the smell coming from it is mouth-watering. One looks like it took a salt bath with gray and brown seasonings at its front. There are those who sits forlornly surrounded by oranges and lemons half cut, giving the large chicken a mesmerizing look. There's another that stands like a knight, armored in butter. One swimming in marinade, some cut already, simply ready to be taken and eaten. Others roasted, glazed, and one resting overlooking a gravy. There's also the weird grain-like things smoking and molded together in a cup-like structure at each plate. All in all, a menu that they have never seen before. Compliments of mine, my lord, and the products that would soon be ready to be sold by my lands of Harrenhal. Feel free to dig in, my lords and ladies, and do please enjoy, Deliana declares with a regal bow. The watching lords no longer need any permission as they eagerly dive into the new cuisine. Soon, the entire hall is filled with the sounds of cutlery as the attendants eagerly devoured their food. Deliana can't help the smug-filled look at her face as they eagerly devoured the turkeys she had just contributed to the harvest feast. The familiar fish provided by the main house Tully sadly forgotten at the sides. She has no doubt that at the end of the week, Lord Victor would be besieged by ravens demanding the export of spices, rice, and turkey meat from Harrenhal. Her merchants would be selling Delianite to other houses soon, not only to the Riverlands. It is after all very limited and as such can only be sold at a very high price. She has no doubt that it will sell well. The rarer an item, the more the people crave it, especially if it is beautiful. It is not a chicken, is it, Lady Deliana? A sweet voice speaks up, jolting the Lady of Harrenhal out of her thoughts. She blinks as she stares at soft green eyes looking back at her that belongs to a young girl. She blinks as she notices the king's guard at her side. Deliana immediately kicks herself. She has been so engrossed with her plan that she deftly forgot about the princess, whose seat is beside her at the high table. A sliced piece of turkey is in front of her, probably cut by a servant from the main table. Apologies, Your Highness, Deliana begins to say while mentally cursing herself for being so woefully inobservant. All her effort, all this time, might be lost if an insulted royal feels the need to butt in. I did not see you there. It's all right, my lady. The princess gives off a soft-eyed smile that makes Deliana blink in surprise. She's a second from confounding to hell and back this royal in order to avoid problems that might damage her plans in the long run. That smile from the princess, however, makes those thoughts stop in a grinding halt. There's no deception in that smile of hers. Harry had been exposed to enough dark wizards and their minions back home that his secondary lying detector was basically instinct. The smile that the princess is giving her is genuine, not like the eating chattering monkeys down below. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lady Deliana, the princess continues saying. I am Myrcella Baratheon, first princess of the realm. You can call me Myrcella for short, minus the princess part. I do look forward for us to being friends, my lady. Deliana blinks at her intentions being stated so directly. Did no one teach this girl about subtlety? She wonders to herself. Still, her words need a reply. Friends? Your Highness, she repeats to the princess, who nods her head with a beaming smile. Yes, and it's Myrcella, not Your Highness, okay? I want you to be my friend. I have heard so much about you, Lady Deliana, from my father. You are my age, but you have accomplished so much already. You also look older. How do you do that? And why are you not wearing a dress, though? I admit your outfit fits you perfectly. How did you find out how to cook something as delicious as this? She rambles on, catching Deliana off by surprise. Her words, actions, and desperation, it all reminds her of a young boy stuck in a cupboard with no one in his life. It is a long time, a sad time, a very lonely phase of his life. That's also the reason why he is so loyal to his first friends, despite the fact that one of them had a character of a lazy, jealous troll. Here is an opportunity to golden to resist. Tell you what, Your Highness. Myrcella. Despite herself, Deliana cannot stop the small smile that appears on her lips at the rather demanding but cute protest. Let us enjoy this harvest feast at the moment. I will tell you all about the food that you are eating right now. Later, however, let us have a ride around the castle, and I'll tell you everything about Harrenhal and my lands. Plus, I would answer all your questions. Deal, Your Highness? Deal. And it's Myrcella. Not Your Highness, replies the cute 6-year-old, puffing out her cheeks. As Deliana smiles back, a part of her feels terrible about using the princess for her personal schemes. Hoster Tully would never say it out loud, but he is both proud and impressed about his bastard daughter. Like everyone else, he has also tasted the food that she donated for the feast, and he can quite confidently say that Riverrun would be ordering a lot of it as soon as possible. He can espy her talking to the crown princess at the left of the table, and judging from the rather happy smile that the princess is doing, the two of them are hitting it perfectly. That is good. Being friends with a royal always pay in dividends in the long run. Look at Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark. The only reason the North is not paying the extra taxes that is being placed on the country to help pay for the crown's debts is because Robert feels good old Ned doesn't need any more problems in his plate. Brilliant, beautiful, and responsible, she is more than ready to be the Lady of Harrenhal. While he disapproved at first, though, of her taking over the houses of her neighbors, he rather admits it is good in a way, seeing that the influence of House Tully in the region is getting a significant boost, something that would be beneficial to the house itself. Oh, only if Edmure would be using his brains instead of his balls. Then he might also be something like her sister. But no, the idiot, instead of taking the opportunity into sucking up to a royal, is instead once more hanging with his friends. Already he can espy, much to his disgust, him and his buddies playing a drinking game, and in the middle of the harvest feast of all times, what is he gonna do with that boy? Despite her success, though, Hoster is a bit worried about Deliana. Despite 6 name days old, the girl looks almost 10 or 11, nothing like her age. This is Westeros, of course, and many say that the weight of responsibility forces a child to grow fast. Deliana has many responsibilities, and she does it well. There are also rumors, however, that the Green Men of the God's Eye swear allegiance to her. Now that's disturbing. Is their magic the one that transformed her and made her grow older than she would be? Are they reason her daughter is so brilliant? He mentally kicks himself. Grumpkins and snarks. Magic is not real. Her daughter's success are her own and not because of some voodoo superstition. The priests of the Seven would certainly not be happy, though, if the religion of the old gods would be practiced at Harrenhal and its lands. This is impossible. Castellan Merrick Root, former lord of this land, can literally feel his jaw crashing on the ground as he observes the newly planted land 2.5 months ago, now filled with a field of gold and green that stretched on forever. Never in his entire life has he seen anything like this. It is, I did tell you to trust in Our Lady's ways and new plans, the smug reply of Lord Victor, Castellan of Harrenhal, and Deliana's second-in-command. As promised, Castellan Root, you will have supervision authorities to all the current homesteads in this area that will farm the lands. Compensation for your knightly house, as dictated by the law, would be given. Do try not to disappoint us. Merrick only dumbly nodded as the surly old man rides off with his death dealer bodyguards, who are all also armored in black, leaving Merrick standing there, looking dumb at the middle of the road. Things have changed greatly for his lands ever since Deliana Tully took over. At first, he has been expecting to be kicked out along with his family and relatives. After all, they were demoted into a knightly house that will serve and protect the Lady of Harrenhal. To his surprise, though, Lord Victor assigned him to manage the land as its castellan, though the taxes would not go him, but straight to the castle. Then comes the changes, the management about the creation of towns, the plans for the creation of roads all over his domain, the new farming equipment, ways and plants, mostly rice and fruits, that would be planted The news from the once empty mines that they found delineated deep below, the plans for the Adventurers Guild, permission for its members to roam the land, the rule for farmers to live in homesteads, and the rather new rules when it comes to taxes. Frankly, all of it makes Merrick's head spin in circles. At first, he had been terribly angry at first. After all, he did not expect that the insane overlarge birds, which is now identified as turkeys, were shipped into parts of his lands in great numbers. It would be like asking for a repeat of the previous disaster after all. But lo and behold, the damned oversized birds are rather docile compared to before. When he had asked, the herders in charge of them were rather tight-lipped and could only share that Diliana Tully concocted something on the water they drink that made them into the placid, friendly birds. There was also the issue of the slaves. Merrick almost rose in rebellion the instant that slaves were added on his small folk all over the three new lands that fall under Deliana's responsibility. Apparently, Lord Victor bought thousands of them at Essos. Almost all of them were farmers, shipmakers, craftsmen, shepherds, herders, and worse, 500 unsullied of all people. He in fact almost went to the king about this personally. However, the Castellan of Harrenhal caught them all in surprise at her next action. Instead of ordering the slaves to work, he announced loudly that they were freed and gave them the option to either stay in the lands of Deliana, Tully as citizens with fair work, good wage, and better protected as free men. Suffice it to say, almost all chose to stay. It was evident immediately how different these former slaves were. Many of them were born and raised under the threat of the whip and death. Such incentives were more than enough to galvanize anyone to do their best, lest they be mercilessly hurt. The result was better farms, better results for whatever craft they were applying themselves to, and better productivity. However, what Merrick noticed most indefinitely from them was their loyalty to the Lady of Harrenhal, whom they had never met into giving them their freedom. Woe to any man who dare badmouth their savior. There were more than one incident on their land after unhappy peasants badmouthed the Lady of Harrenhal within a former slave's hearing. The unsullied especially can be lethal in dishing out punishments, willing to do dung duty for days, if only to put the moron that insulted their savior out of commission badly. Merrick Root grumbles to himself, though, as he returns back to his home. With this large of rice and fruit production, he would be doing the ledger and accounting all night. As he rides his horse, though, he can't help but wonder to whom would they be selling all this produce. She is so awesome. In all her imagination, Myrcella never expects that the newly minted would be this incredible. She had expected a girl like her age, probably the same height, and having a bit more confidence than she does. Deliana Tully, however, is anything but. Even seated among the other lords of the Riverlands, she can see it, her standing tall and proud with her child held high, not the slightest bit of doubt and hesitancy on her actions, if not for the fact that her father told her that Deliana Tully was a legitimized bastard. She might never had suspected it. Every inch of her screamed highborn. She had always been taught by the faith that bastards were a result of sin, and therefore below those of natural birth. They were weak-willed and always plotting and evil at the core. What she saw in Deliana, however, was not that. Tall and very mature for someone her age, she looked not the least weak-willed. There was cunning and mischievousness in her eyes, and pride. Myrcella only knows one woman in her entire life who was like that. Her mother, however, unlike her mother, there was no pettiness or hate oozing from the Lady of Harrenhal. Instead, it was confidence and ambition, something that her Lannister blood fully respects. That's the reason why she accepted Diliana's offer to ride with her around the castle grounds. Apparently, princesses should not see men when they are deep into their cups, according to Diliana. Myrcella would very like to point out that she got a front view seat of that thanks to her father, the professional, drunk, and unofficial whoremonger, but she did not state it for the sake of her father's pride. Ciro Card, of course, protested at first and insisted that they bring a retinue of guards before she protested, and thus they reduced the guard to 4 instead of the original 20. He suggested, "Here on this ride, Diliana has shown her what made her different from all the other nobles, be it lord or lady. She has the pleasure to meet intelligent." It begun as a simple question. How do plants grow? Then when she answers, Diliana explains about what she calls the circle of life. how everything interconnects with one another, about how the entire world that they are dwelling is a system that goes on and on for thousands of years, to say that Myrcella is totally enraptured by the things she is telling her. She then tells her about heat, how it is made, the process of fire making it, of how cold affects the heat, chases it. It's so mind-boggling. This changes the perception of Myrcella to her. Yes, with all her regality, exotic beauty, and pride, the thing that makes Deliana Tully great is her mind. She is brilliant and intelligent, and she puts it to good use. She will never forget her words. Know the practice of earth, fire, air, and water, and the very world will become your tool. Knowledge is power. Right there, and then she decides that she would be someone like her. She would learn from Deliana Tully, even if it's the last thing she does. She would not be some weak-willed princess stuck on the Red Keep, subject only to the whims of an evil brother, a drunkard father, and an ignorant father. No. She would be Myrcella Baratheon, and she will find her own path. She now only needs to convince her father on this. She has snidely asked Deliana while they are riding if she could also become like her. The Lady of Harrenhal only laughs and replies with an affirmative yes, so at least she knows that she won't be rejected by her once she manages to convince her father. As these thoughts, however, mull inside her brain, she fails to see a victorious smirk that appears on the thoughts of her new inspiration, her green eyes blazing with fire at her victory. 2 hours later, a dozen riders left Harrenhal carrying with them a parcel carrying a precious cargo. Their destination, Casterly Rock, with a personal message addressed to Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West. A month after the harvest feast of Riverrun. A leader must always know the right person to delegate. Deliana muses to herself as she rides alongside Lord Victor, the latter summarizing to her the status of everything that she sees around her. Suffice it to say that Deliana is pleased with the current running of her lands. As she expected, the Lord Castellan of Harrenhal was showered literally with letters either by raven or personal messengers from the other lords. It took him and Maester Walkman almost a week to sort out the letters and address the other lords about their orders of turkey, spices, and most of all, crafted Delianite. Her demonstration is even a greater success. In fact, than Deliana expected, exotic and new, plus adding great taste for the palate, the spices are in extremely high demand that the first harvest is not even close into fulfilling half of the orders. The personal caretaker of Lord Tywin himself had ordered 70 sacks full of spices, with a requested demand for 100 more from the next harvest. They're all so large orders from the Crown lands, a straightforward request from her father, Hoster Tully, to supply Riverrun with turkey and spices. And that's not discounting the Reach Lords, who also ordered their own quotas. She has to prioritize in order not to alienate the major lords while making promises to the minor ones. Who knew that the bad positioning of the Riverlands would be beneficial in a way? Apparently, not only Riverlords are present during the Harvest Feast, neighboring lords of the other kingdoms had also attended, others representatives from their Lord Paramounts themselves. Suffice it to say, they experienced also her demonstration and had rushed back to their homes, spreading the news like wildfire. Of course, Deliana isn't stupid. The process of how to grow spices is literally a homestead secret, and every seed and leaf that would be used to replace the first harvest were kept on each homestead storage space under lock and key. Normally, this would be a problem due to farmers being bribed, their loyalty wonky due to the desire of monetary gains. Deliana, however, has no such problem. The citizens of Harrenhal, after all, had been chugging loyalty and nutrition potions without their know-how. Saw their brain off, and they would not even entertain the thought of betraying her. The sale of butterbeer also and fire whiskey is at an all-time high demand. That she received complaints from the other houses like Red Wine and other houses of Dorne due to their stock being unbought. Deliana took great pleasure burning those. Butterbeer, after all, tastes like sweet beer, only with the added effect of not being drunk. More conservative and strict houses like House Tarly, who frowns on the practice of being inebriated, orders casket by the dozens. Fire whiskey surprisingly comes in extremely high demand from the Crownlands and the northern houses. King Robert himself orders 200 for his personal use alone. Apparently he enjoys the heat and the steam that comes out of his ears, plus its great taste and its rather high effect on rendering him drunk quickly. The Northerners, on the other hand, were more practical on their large order of fire whiskey. It helps keep them warm, period. She's got to give it to Northerners who are practical even with their choice of drink. While the spices, the turkey, and the liquor were selling well. Nothing is in greater demand than Delionite. Moldable diamond, the majority of the world now calls it. There were even orders overseas, and Delionite sells highly by the gram. Apparently it evolved into something that even Delionite did not expect. The original purpose of Delionite would be a mineral rare only on Harrenhal that would sell well, incredibly. However, once more human ingenuity paved new roads, the very existence of Delionite solved the problems of ornamental designs to be placed on weapons and armor. As a golden rule, you can never put too much ornament on a sword or armor. The extra weight tends to throw off the balance and control of the user, which can be proven fatal in a fight. After all, every single bit of advantage are needed when you are fighting for your life against someone. With Delionite so lightweight and malleable, it can be integrated into any weapon without the usual drawbacks that putting too much jewelry tend to do. Thus, a skilled warrior can bleach himself to a peacock in armor and still fight as deadly as the one without design. Already boatloads were bought by the Iron Bank, and Diliana was forced to transmutate once more the already dug mines, 18 in all of her 3 new territories, in order to keep up with at the least the farthest limit of demand. However, it is Victor's work about the former slaves that made Deliana impressed with the old man. Never in 1,000 years had Deliana thought about buying slaves from Essos by the multitudes and bringing them here to Westeros and freeing them, thus making them not only legal in the eyes of the Westeros, but also incredibly grateful and loyal to her. It is almost a mile up from her original plan of bribing every homeless peasant on King's Landing and inviting them to her lands. After all, Victor did not just buy them randomly en masse, no. Almost each of them had a trade of their own, which she admits, silently, she never even thought of herself. She winced at the realization that she almost invited thousands of bums to her lands. After all, not all homeless were homeless due to lack of work. Others simply deserved it. Thus, the 100,000 slaves that Lord Victor bought were not only an efficient workforce the moment they were freed. She frowned, though, at the loss on the treasury, which was almost half. Shipping slaves required money after all, and renting a lot of ships to cross the narrow sea. They were also zealous and the best on what they did. Something that Deliana needs now, if she plans to initiate the next step of her plan. With her acquiring of the lands of House Darry and House Root, this basically gives Deliana access to the end of the Fork River that leads to the Bay of Crabs south of the Vale that is connected to the sea. With this new access to the waters of Westeros, she can fully circumnavigate the twins controlled by Lord Walder Frey. There is a good reason, after all, that Deliana does not include the large amount of rice currently being stockpiled and accounted from the 3 lands she got into the market. She has bigger plans than to simply sell them to any potential buyer. Yes, she plans to sell them to the Northerners. What better product? After all, for men, enduring winter head-on than non-perishable food that gives you strength, better than any grain, and at the same time can taste great and easy to cook. Long discussion, short. Deliana plans to monopolize the food supply to the north, or if that's not possible, get control of the majority of it. Her farms, after all, are enchanted and saturated by potions and can have double or triple, pushing it the harvest of any regular farm in Westeros. She can totally supply fully the north, and better, not at cutthroat prices. One of the main reasons why food and grain at the north are so expensive is because of the Freys. The weasel-eyed Argus Filch lookalikes tend to ask for extremely high tolls for traveling merchant trains going up north. This forces the merchants to sell to their customers up north at higher prices in order to avoid operating at a loss. So while the Northerners struggle to scrape up money to buy food, the weasels at the twins get fat and rich. Deliana does not plan to have her food trains subjected to that. Over high prices, however, the Starks, after all, are her family. By law, through Catelyn, her true-born half-sister. It would be fair for them as long as it's her providing. That is why she needs a direct access to the sea. With a sea route, she'll get her supplies to White Harbor without the filthy paws of the Filch lookalikes touching it. For that, she'll need ships, small enough to sail the river before breaking into open water, but large enough to carry the supplies to White Harbor. That is the reason why she is here riding beside Lord Victor at the river's edge of former House Darry's lands. According to her castellan, one of the slaves that he had purchased was a shipwright of excellent skill, and he lives here. Are you sure that he can be trusted, Victor? I would not want my ride here to be simply a waste of time. I would never have brought you here, my lady, if there is any doubt that he would be able to fulfill into your specifications, replies the Castellan of Harrenhal with a bow. He might be a bit odd, quite eccentric, and refuses to live with the others in one of the homesteads. He is skilled with an axe, though, and better with a hatchet. He prefers to live where waters are near, according to him, my lady. You piqued my curiosity, Victor. Sounds like our shipwright is unique. You have my trust. You have a name for our mysterious shipwright? Of course, my lady. His name is Floki. King's Landing, Red Keep. There are few times in his life nowadays that Robert Baratheon can feel content. Fewer that can make him happy. Looking at his bedside, though, he can espy from where he is lying. The crude paper flower positioned at a side table. It is ugly, mismatched, and certainly not looking the least a flower, but rather more of a mismatched form of paper shaped into standing. Certainly not fit for the personal resting place of the King of the Seven Kingdoms. Looking at it, though, brings Robert, it would be too much to say joy, but rather a sense of pride and fulfillment, a small ray of hope from the gloomy life that he is striding on day by day. It is a sign that he, at the very least, is not a total failure as a father. It was given to him by his daughter. Robert can still remember that day as clearly as today. He'd been just finished up with the whores from Littlefinger's brothel when, without warning, the doors to his bedchambers slammed open with Sir Aerys Oakheart trampling a surprised Sir Barristan Selmy towards him. Robert might have been mad as a bull for the disruption when the Kingsguard hissed at him that his daughter was coming and fast. It took a second for Robert to register before sprining up. Never had he moved so quickly, throwing on a nightrobe while almost literally throwing the naked whores out of his room, who dogpiled the trampled Sir Barristan before running off, stepping upon the old knight even more. There were just some things that daughters must not see, and Robert, bad father or not, was adamant about those things. As it was, he barely managed to make himself look presentable when a blur of gold and red slammed into his neck, muttering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," a lot of times happily before giving to him the paper flower as a gift. Suffice it to say, Robert was a bit overwhelmed. He can count literally at a single hand the times his children interacted with him happily, thanks to that shrew of a mother of theirs. For the next 2 hours, Robert listened as his daughter narrated quite loudly and with many hand gestures her adventures at the Harvest Feast of Riverrun. Robert only listened amused as Myrcella describes again and again the new Lady of Harrenhal. As he listened, the King of the Seven Kingdoms gave himself a mental pat in the back. Apparently, not only did his daughter met Deliana Tully, the two of them got along well together, with Myrcella apparently learning a lot. Never had he seen his daughter act so lively here in the Red Keep. She was laughing, dancing, and acting carefree. In other words, she was happy. That was why Robert can never say no to her when she asked if she can stay for a few months at Lady Deliana's domain. He had never seen Myrcella full of life, and Robert be damned if he let that smile of hers be suffocated by this cesspool of a city as it did to him. That is also the reason why Robert is frowning as he sits facing the flower that his daughter gave her. As he expected, Cersei vehemently opposed his decision to send Myrcella at Harrenhal. She literally screamed his ears off. For someone who doted on Joffrey, she can be quite a miser hoarding gold when it comes to her other two children. He knew enough through long and bitter experience that he would never convince Cersei alone. No, what Robert needs is someone who can bring Cersei down to heel enough to say yes. Problem is, there's only one person who can do that. God's all this thinking is giving me a headache. No, so, where are you, you little shit? More wine and fire whiskey. God's bless that Tully bastard for fire whiskey. At least it can knock me out quickly, more than wine ever could. Casterly Rock. Lord Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West. Casterly Rock. Lord Lannister. As your brother told me before, if I get my hands of any more Valyrian items, and if I am willing, I would be able to sell them to you. So, here it is, my lord, a circlet, Valyrian steel, made and laid with gold. How I got my hands on such a rare item, I'll keep to myself. I'm sure that you would be tempted into melting this and turning this into some sort of weapon. My lord, I implore you not to do so. In exchange for payment for such a rare find, I do ask that the Princess Myrcella Baratheon be my ward here at Harrenhal. I can guarantee her safety and protection fully upon my house's honor. Me and the princess had been close friends ever since we met at the harvest feast at Riverrun, and I do miss her company a lot. I have heard, however, how reluctant the Queen Mother is about letting her children away from her sight. As head of her house, I do implore you to intervene. If it is not possible that she could come, then the payment for this Valyrian circlet is 1,500,000 gold dragons. Signed, Deliana Tully, Lady of Harrenhal. A loud laugh leaves Tywin Lannister's lips, startling his brother Kevin, who had been in the process of drinking his tea. I do appreciate, brother, if you do not make me choke on my own drink. The younger Lannister quips at his older brother. Here, read this. The old Lion of the Rock simply hands the letter at his younger brother, who takes a minute to read it before putting it down on the table. She's quite direct and demanding, he comments. Indeed she is, Tywin replies, leaning on his chair before a smirk appears on his lips. Quite cunning, too, and brave. Not foolhardy. A raised eyebrow from Kevin. She did say that she'll give this to you for free in exchange for Princess Myrcella as a ward? It's not fair to her, is it? I meant 1,000,000 golden dragons compared to housing the princess. Seems a poor exchange. No, at normal times it would be not, Tywin Lannister answers before letting one of his rare smiles appear at his face. However, nothing is normal when it comes to Deliana Tully, and I admit that this move of hers is quite clever. How so? The very reason why she chooses wardenship of the crown princess instead of money tells a lot. She does not need it. Gold at the moment, judging from the booming trade coming from Harrenhal, it is no surprise. By gaining the wardenship of the crown princess Myrcella, she would not only gain a powerful ally from the royal family, it would also give her the image of being favored. No lord would dare challenge her then. Who would with the princess as your ward? And in your favor. Also, if the friendship between the two of them would be true, the princess would support her no matter the issue. This is a masterstroke, and I am impressed. But why tell you, though? Asks Kevin. Why bother messaging you? Because she knows that only I can move Cersei, the final obstacle, out of her plan. Without Cersei's consent, Robert can do nothing about sending her daughter away. If it is from me, however, she will have no choice. The circlet is a bribe for me to do as she asks. And will you do it? Yes, I think I will, answers Tywin, standing up, as he looks down from the window. It is high time that Cersei's children start learning. It will be good if Myrcella connects with Deliana Tully. Harrenhal is becoming richer by the day. The princess can learn something from the dubbed cleverest woman of Westeros. It is better than being stuck on the Red Keep, being taught by Septus. With her wardenship, the relationship between the crown and this new player would improve, and through the crown, House Lannister. We might even get our hands on some Dillionite before the Iron Bank once more buys it all. She's a former bastard brother, points out Kevin. Yes, she is, answers Tywin, taking a fresh piece of paper. And look how far she has risen. Castle of Harrenhal, or rather now, ruined Castle of Harrenhal. Archways. Why are you building archways on the hillside? Asks a very confused Matthew, watching the now finished man-made plateau, kind of hill looming over them, as tall as the once ruined castle of Harrenhal, now fully recycled on the weird nature contraption. While he is proud of his men from the guild of finishing the simple-looking plateau hill quite advanced from schedule, he still can't get over the fact that they would be building something so simple. I don't know, boss, but that old castellan commanded directly from the top that we install archways on the hillsides, alongside with some weird-looking houses. Boss, I don't know if our customer is fond of tree houses, but it feels like she is, replies Ellie, his second in command. He has every carpenter that knows how to hold a hammer, helping us all out on this endeavor. Fine, Matthew waves off and walks away. Just leave my name out of it. Sure thing, boss. Oh, I almost forgot that they also asked us to reroute the river from the God's Eye around the hill into some kind of contraption like a waterfall. I said leave my name out of it. Are you meaning to tell me that you're using this as a what? A wake-up fruit? Deliana's voice is literally dripping with sarcasm. The farmer, however, in front of her, either is extremely dull or is simply ignoring her attitude as he beams like a small puppy, nodding his head vigorously. Yes, your ladyship, each homestead here have been growing it in abundance in our personal gardens, quite handy, mind you, my lady, for keeping us awake. The bitter taste is enough to wake up a fully grown man for an entire day's of work at the field. I see, that's good, I guess, replied the Lady of Harrenhal, eyebrow twitching in no small amount of annoyance. Here she is, doing her best. introducing new crops and ways to serve as a foundation of her ruling. When all the while, there is an entire fortune simply sitting here at her backyard, undiscovered. A gold mine that the morons have been unable to exploit due to lack of knowledge. Lyanna, by accident, have stumbled upon coffee beans when visiting one of the homesteads here at the former lands of Derry. We grow them in Essos by the dozen. My lady, the good masters forces us to swallow them when we work to prevent us from slacking or falling asleep. We have brought a lot of them here and followed the practice, my lady. It would not do, after all, if we repay your kindness with not putting our best effort on these lands. You have freely given us. Of course, Lyanna waves off to the farmer. And might I ask, do every homestead have these? And how many are there that you have harvested already? Let me see. I guess every homestead have this, my lady, in large amounts. We have shared the practice, after all, to our Westerosi counterparts, and they also love the practice as it helps them on their work. As for many, there are, last I checked, we have dozens of sacks of these beans, my lady, at our homestead alone. That's an interesting concept, sir. Brian, my lady, the man finishes. And no, sir, for that. I am no lauded knight, after all, but a free man loyal to you and to my homestead. Very well, Mr. Brine. I will tell you that I am pleased of your concept of work and your produce. In fact, Mr. Brine, I would encourage you to plant more of these beans that you have shown me. My lady? The farmer asks, quite confused at the pleased smirk adorning Lyanna's face. Also, I would like to buy from you some of the sacks of these beans that you have in store, says Sylvana, already waving to one of her guards to step forward carrying her purse, a very large sack filled with coins. H, how many would you like to buy, my lady? The farmer asks nervously as Lyanna opens the sack, fishing out a handful of gold dragons. A predatory smile appears on the beautiful young face of the Lady of Harrenhal. All of it. Floki would like to believe himself a simple man. He loved ships, loved building them especially. Born unto slavery, Floki learned quickly that the best way to not have a dragon carved into the side of your skull was to do your best at the least amount of time. Owned by one of the Volantine masters, he had been trained as a craftsman and a shipwright ever since he learned how to walk. Floki realized then that he had a talent for designing and making ships. His master, however, did not appreciate his new designs when he presented them to him. He preferred the trusty and reliable ship designs of the current age. Thus, he carved a dragon on the side of Floki's skull as punishment for wasting his time. The opposite side of Floki's head was carved bloody when his master did not like him brooding. Smile a lot, Floki. Laugh a lot, Floki, before I open your mouth, ear to ear, he once said. Ever since then, Floki giggled and laughed, a defense mechanism to avoid having more parts of him torn apart by the carving knife. For years, he slaved under his master with the other shipwrights and even got into his life. Helga, one of the maids, is his lover. Helga was kind and compassionate and was not afraid of Floki's eccentric behavior. She loved him and Floki loved her in return. He was one of those sold at Volantes to Lord Victor Castellan of Harrenhal. Here he, along with the rest of the slaves, got into their new life in freedom. For the first time in his life, Floki was free. No more the fear of the carving knife biting into his skull and ripping apart skin, flesh, and bone. No, nasty masters shouting at him, throwing shit at him, or asking him to bark like an animal. Instead, as he lived his new life as a shipwright here at the shores of the former lands of Derry, what he got instead was polite people and small folk asking him to repair their small boats that they were using on their day-to-day lives. It is a good life, a boring life, a life of peace and plenty that Floki would not change for anything in the world. Then she came, their liberator, looking extremely young and small compared to the large men-at-arms and personal bodyguards of Lord Victor. Before, Floki simply admired her from afar, an unknown person with a name and without a face. He would forever be grateful, though, and loyal. That was something that would never change. When she came, though, asking him if he would build her a boat, he opened the gates of his heart. His long-time desire, given free rein as long as it served her needs. He was given men to command, him a former slave who had nothing on his name in order to fully utilize his talent in the highest order. Floki would do as she says. She gave him a month to finish her demands. Floki will do it in 3 days. Despite the now lacking presence of the carving knife, the urgency it pronounced on its bones to work as fast as possible can never be erased. Still, one thing remained true for Floki, though, as he finished setting up the last of the sails of the 6 boats he finished for his goddess. Floki loved his liege, and he would never fail her in any way. Bay of Seals, south of the Vale. If somebody would tell Deliana that one day she would be sailing on an actual long ship, she might have jinxed them. As it is, though, she does her best not to hurl her guts out at the side of the boat once more. Put her in the air, zipping at 100 miles per hour, and she would not flinch. Make her look down from the top of the highest tower of Harrenhal, she would not balk. Put her on a ship, though, and let's just say the former esteemed man who conquered does not fare well. Her experience with ships as Harry the Great on sailing vessels before was almost non-existent. Why bother using ships after all when you can simply fly over oceans with brooms or a flying carpet, or better yet, apparate or flew for instantaneous travel? Right now, however, none of the 3 is an option as the longship breezes through the harsh waves freely. Suffice it to say, Floki's work result is exceptional. Deliana, after all, asked from him a hard requirement to meet. The boats must be small enough, after all, to be able to sail the narrow routes of the Riverlands, but also must be wide and large enough that they would be able to carry large amounts of cargo while braving the sea. It must also be flexible enough to escape pirates. Once, after all, a trade route is established, it tends to attract thieves like flies on meat. The result of her demands from Floki is the longship, small enough to sail the rivers of the Riverlands unopposed, but also able to sail the seas with incredibly high speed. "Are you all right, my lady?" asks a concerned Emilia, handing Deliana a handkerchief, which she immediately takes, wiping off the drool that is still sticking on her lips. "I will be," groans the Lady of Harrenhal, unhappily trying to pull herself together. Despite the rocky motion of the longboat, apparently she neglected to include the comfort part from her list of demands at Floki, and is now paying the price for it. "Come here, my lady, and lean on me," Emilia gently urges her, which Deliana acquiesces without much protest, as she leans on the rather firm but soft bosom of Emilia. Emilia, suffice to say, the least is the cousin of Lord Victor and one of the green men population. Suffice it to say that the Lord Castellan of Harrenhal isn't happy with her decision to personally sail to the north, alongside with the first of the harvest. That is why he's sending Emilia, since he has to remain at Harrenhal to make sure that everything continues to be up and running while she goes to the north. Deliana is certainly not complaining. Where in the world is she all this time, is Deliana's first thought when she was introduced to the pale beauty. Emilia back on Earth might have been labeled a natural Russian beauty, pale skin, hair tied to a bun at the back of her head, flexible and well-endowed. Zita Gorog, from Underworld Inspiration, she is 15 years old, closer to Deliana's age, and prefers to wear the familiar green leather of the green men, with a saber at her side. Unlike the others, though, hers is rather form-hugging, a kind of trend that many of the more rebellious women back at Harrenhal is wearing, inspired fully by her outfit from the Riverrun Harvest Feast. Deliana's preference, after all, remained the same, even though she is born in this new body. She is, after all, still Harry Potter, and Harry Potter prefers women. In fact, one of Deliana's major frustrations in this new life of hers is the rather large absence of sex life. Harry Potter, after all, loves visiting Villa enclaves for good reason back then. In her babyfied age, though, she can't do any of her usual activities without being labeled, even by himself, as messed up in the head. Thus, the long stretch of celibacy, until she's got her first moonblood at least, something which she is not looking forward at. Still, the presence of Emilia is greatly appreciated in this stretch of her journey. Nothing can stave off a dreary journey than the presence of a beautiful young woman at your presence. Besides, it seems that the cousin of Lord Victor rather likes her presence, judging from the slender arms around her smaller frame, pulling Deliana to herself. If she is a lord paramount, her presence would not be needed, however. As simply one of Lord Tully's bannermen, it is expected of her to show up if she plans to establish a trade agreement here. She would be dealing, after all, with the Starks of Winterfell, the Lord Paramounts of the North. Despite being a Tully herself, she had never interacted with Catelyn, the wife of Lord Eddard Stark. Thus, she would find no preferential treatment in the North. Thus, her presence here on this vessel of nightmares that bucks heavily against the rather large waves. She has to give it to Floki, though, no matter the size of the waves. The longboat cuts through it like fishes on water, never wavering on its fast speed. Still, though, how long till we reach White Harbor? Deliana glumly asks, as she leans more on the warmth that Emilia provides. 2 days, my lady, if the weather holds, answers the young woman. Look, my lady, far ahead is Gullstone and belongs to the... Deliana tunes her out of her effort on distracting her of the seasickness she is feeling. She just hopes that the raven that Lord Victor arrives before she does at White Harbor. No one at White Harbor, after all, expects 5 longboats to come sailing into their ports unannounced. Meek, his name is just Peak before, when he is a simple administrator at Lysac, is a slave. His former masters at Lysac taught him his numbers in order for him to be well suited for his job. They, of course, cut off a little bit of his fingers every time he fails his tests. Now all but 2 of his fingers at his left hand are gone before he became good at his job. Now his name is Peak Harbor Master here in this fast-growing homestead at Rice Point, as the other folk call it. Once it had been the home of shipmaster builder Floki. However, once the orders from the Lady of Harrenhal came about, the building of the newly designed ships, men flocked here at the call of Floki. Where men flocked, business also followed, and everything else that might be needed to accommodate the pleasures of life. In the end, the once isolated area became a large town as the standing order of Deliana about the building of more longships increased. Now, instead of the rickety walkway to the waters, harbors made of wood and planks filled the river edge, where dozens of longships were moored and constrained. At the shoreline, skeletons of more of the ships were laid out as Floki supervised the shipwrights and their aides. The town behind him were booming with the large number of people. Rice's Point would be the center of rice trade of Harrenhal to the north once the green light from their lady comes. Already large warehouses were being constructed to house the rather large shipments of rice from the former lands of Dairy Root and Wood. Houses were also slotted to be constructed to house the hundreds of workers that would be essential to the continuing of the business on the new large homestead. It's being a large, soon-to-be-ready homestead, it was slotted to Peak Harbor Master as its new head, thanks to his administration skills. That was needed in order to organize the homestead to the criteria set by Lord Victor. It was quite overwhelming, in fact, for the once slave of Lys. From nothing, he now commanded respect and obedience from other people who would follow his orders without question. Her lady, wherever she was right now, was truly worthy of adoration and respect. Peak just hoped that his best on maintaining the rice trade to the north once it started be good enough to that. He will not in any way disappoint her. White Harbor, the north. Lord Eddard Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, inhales the familiar sea breeze as he stands at the edge of the pier overlooking the wide seas that lead westward. Such smell brings nostalgic memories of his time in the Vale, when he and Robert would sneak out from under Lord Arryn's nose and sail on the seas with a borrowed boat. You have to give it to Robert, the man was a fine sailor, as he was a warrior. No surprises there, he was raised in Storm's End after all. The sound of laughter behind him made Ned Stark smile as he observes his eldest son Robb poring over some ledgers with Lord Wyman Wanderley tutoring him. The boy is growing fast and dutiful. He would make a fine warden of the North one day. The sound of shouting behind him, however, made Ned Stark wince as he espies Jon, his bastard, and nephew in secret, helping the other workers carry the crates from one of the docking ships to the harbor, with that familiar grim countenance that all Starks are known for. Normally, he might have been poring over the ledgers and learning with Robb, if not for his status. As it is, the lad wanted to be useful instead of sitting down and doing nothing, thus the labor. Eddard Stark has always makes it a point to tour the houses of the North every now and then. It prevents the other lords from slacking off with their work and responsibilities. Plus, it always affirmed their loyalty to House Stark. Northerners, after all, love to brag on the rare occasion when they are gathered, and what's more to brag than having your liege lord visit your keep. This year, however, Ned Stark had brought Robb and Jon with him. The former is because of his responsibility to lead the North one day. The second is to get Jon away from Catelyn. The woman, it seems, was truly unable to get over the fact of his hatred towards his bastard. It's quite surprising seeing how caring and loving she can be to her children and to the other children of their servants on Winterfell. When he found out that Jon had been forced to sleep alongside with the dogs, Ned had enough. He cannot fully demand his lady wife to stop, but he can give Jon a break. Thus why he brought him on this trip. The two, after all, can learn a lot here. White Harbor is the seat of House Manderly and one of the most important supply lines of the North. Here almost all of the trade by sea that goes northlands. Despite its rather southern practices, it remains as one of the North's most loyal, and Wyman Manderly had been Ned's friend for many years. It is also well guarded, thanks to having the largest population out of all the towns of the North. It can almost be called a small city. My lord, the sudden appearance of a runner wearing the Manderly's coat of arms appeared, heading to Wyman, stopping the discussion between him and Robb as he hands over the letter. Curious Ned Stark walks to him as Wyman Manderly opens it. Everything all right? Ned Stark asks the moment he gets close. Yes, my lord, yes. Just an unusual message, my lord, from the Meister. Unusual? Yes. We've got ships incoming to the dock. It is simply a heads up from my house in order to avoid complications, answers Wyman with a sigh. Interesting. And where are these ships from and who do they belong to? Asks Ned. His attention, however, is cut off as two horn blasts sound from the watchtower overlooking the harbor. Unnamed ships spotted on the horizon, my lord. The loud watchman, specifically chosen for his voice, shouted from above. They're here? How can they be here so fast? Wyman murmurs more to himself as he strides forward to the dock, his men-at-arms following him completely, leaving Ned Stark's question unanswered. Father? 7-year-old Robb Stark looks at him questioningly with Jon Snow at his side. Stay behind me, Ned simply says before walking off to where Wyman Manderly is standing at the docks with his men. As he looks at the horizon, though, he can espy 3 boats, almost like small ships sailing fast through the waters, rows at their sides, urging the ships along across the icy waters of the North. Eddard Ned Stark, however, has never in his entire life of experience seen ships of their design. It is not the build of the vessels, however, that catches his attention, but rather the sigil painted on the square sails of each vessel. It is a sigil that he is familiar with, a silver trout on a field of green. What in the world is House Tully doing here with those ships? He asks, no one in particular, as the first of the ships easily reach the edge of the harbor. Harrenhal Castle, or what's left of it. Excuse me. You want us to create what? Matthew blinks in confusion, as one of the so-called green men who are supervising the designs of the hill with the weird archways and contraptions nods in affirmation. Yes, we would like you to build them on the required specifications as indicated on the plan here. He gives to Matthew a large roll of paper that the master builder deftly takes before opening. Immediately his eyebrows start twitching in annoyance. You want us to build ladders? His voice can almost relate to the disbelief in his voice. The green man, however, seems not to notice it, or simply ignores it. Yes, he nods sagely. There are certain parts of the hill that my companions need to reach in order to plant seeds. The ladders must be movable so that we can use the archways as bases on the different sides. Okay? Matthew can say nothing but gurgles as his frustration is almost reaching boiling point. As it is, he just nods in defeat at the green man. Why bother protesting, after all, if his name is not the one that is going to be placed on this bloody contraption of a castle? Training camp of the Unsullied near the God's Eye. Fog covers the God's Eye, like always, and the very dumbest or the very bravest of men would dare risk the roads on this sacred place. It is, after all, the only place where it's said that the powers of the old gods remain. It doesn't help that these days there is a continuous fog on it that deters even the most armed knights and their escorts from crossing. If one would dare cross it, though, not far from the main dirt road, Diliana's secret side project runs. The sound of shields banging one another, the stomping of feet in synchronized cadence, the counting of instructors together with the hundreds of throats following the repetitions, the clash of weapons hitting one another in a spar can only be drowned by the shouts of the unsullied instructors on the other parts of the field. 5,000 men can be found here, and none in Westeros are the wiser about the presence of the first ever professional army in its land. However, among the rest of the black and gray-clad Unsullied, one stands taller and separate from the rest. Pale in complexion, his once beach blonde hair is cut short into a cropped cut, just like all Unsullied on their first day of recruitment. He is one of the Unsullied that Lord Victor purchased from Essos. Assigned by the Castellan under direct orders from the goddess that freed them, he is to train these volunteer civilians into a fighting force that can defend his goddess's lands. Dragon shit. His former masters at Astapor named him in mockery of his rather Valyrian features. He was born on Lysae, one of the whorehouses, and was sold like many to the slavers of Astapor. There he was beaten almost to death, forced to murder other kids to prove his mettle to be one of the Unsullied. Had his manhood cut and burned without making a sound, and he earned his spear and shield when he took a young babe from its mother's arms and threw it in the sea. It was a life that can barely be called a life, forced to follow the whip without a thought. He owed everything to his goddess for freeing them from the life of blood, sweat, and whips that the wise masters had subjected him to. He would do his best to train these green boys to men of steel and purpose like his brothers and him. He would not fail his purpose as commander of the Unsullied here. For dragon shit is different from other Unsullied. Despite the rather unfair circumstance of his current life, he views it as penance for the life he lived before. Decadence brought by wrong company, pride of wealth, and status, taking great pleasures in inflicting torture to those whose lives he deemed lesser than his own. It is an irony that he is now suffering under the whip he took so much pleasure from using before. You see, dragon shit knew who he was before he became dragon shit in this world. Before his name was Draco Malfoy. White Harbor, seat of House Manderley. Eddard Stark always appreciated bluntness and directness. Like any Northerner, he personally abhors the plots and the double dealings that the Southerners seem to enjoy. However, even he is caught off guard by the forwardness that this young relative of his wife's house thrusts in his face. Currently, they are in the private solar of Lord Manderley with himself, his heir Robb, Lord Manderley himself, their guest, Deliana Tully, and her personal guard, Amelia, who refused to leave her lady's side. Despite the isolationist practice of the North compared to the other kingdoms of Westeros, Eddard knows about the girl who learned from Old Town and is rumored to be the cleverest person currently on Westeros. Even back at Winterfell, he has several caskets of fire whiskey that he bought from a merchant from White Harbor, very useful on staving off the cold on bad days. So, Eddard Stark begins looking at the tall girl, who looks none the least fazed, even though being eyed by a Lord Paramount. She looks regal on her red wine-colored tunic and pants, practical, he admits, when riding those longboats of theirs, about your proposal. It seems impossible, my lady. A frown mars her young features. If might I ask why, my lord? Eddard winces as he puts down the ledger that she had given him when she first stated her desire for coming here. It's just impossible, my lady. You're asking me to cut off trade from most of my usual sources and buy this rice solely from you. Are you even sure that you can supply the whole North with your lands alone? A scowl is now present in her features, and Eddard Stark raises an eyebrow at it. It is considered impolite, after all, to do that in the presence of a Lord Paramount. I would not propose it if it's not feasible at all. My lord, I have devised a way for our farmlands to have 4 harvests in a year compared to the usual 2 in this continent. Plus, this rice that I am offering you would be a lot better compared to the usual crops that you and lords purchase from the south. Also, you have read from my proposal the qualities that it has that makes it superior from the other crops that you buy in the Reach and the Riverlands. Yes, I have, answers Eddard. It seems to be a little too good to be true. Food that would not spoil as long as it's in a dry area and can be cooked quickly with an excellent taste to it. There's also something about carbohydrates and energy that went all over his head before he simplifies it by understanding that it gives more energy compared to the usual food supply. The North buys from the South, but you have to understand my position, my lady. I cannot guarantee anything that you are submitting to me without seeing it firsthand. I cannot just alienate the North's usual suppliers without reason, and fully seeing for a few years the results of your proposal. To his surprise, a Cheshire grin appears on the girl's face. Of course, my lord, I understand that. I would think you a fool if you said yes to my proposal immediately. Eddard can literally hear the angry grinding of teeth from Robb and Lord Manderley at the insult. Eddard, however, has much thicker skin than the two. You don't survive Robert's rebellion intact by being easily baited by words, after all. Besides, it's not as if there is no grain of truth in what she said. he'd be a fool to say yes immediately. All right, my lady, I sense that you are wanting to propose something. Eddard Stark says, leaning on his chair backward with arms folded. Indeed, my lord, Deliana Tully replies with that Cheshire grin, never leaving her face. With me are 900 sacks of rice grains, my lord. I propose that you buy them from me and test them yourself to check if what I'm saying is true or not about the practicality of my product. I buy them from you. All 900. Eddard blinks at first because of the audacity of this girl selling to his face directly for a test. It is never cheap to buy grain from the south, though. Long and bitter experience taught him that. Secondly, he is impressed. 5 of those long ships, and they carried almost 900 sacks with them. He needs to take a peek on them later. She must have seen his less than favorable reaction, for she laughs without warning before standing up from her chair. Don't worry about the price, my lord. Compared to the usual sack of grain that you buy from either the Reach or the Riverlands, you can say that I sell to you my product at, let's say, a quarter only of the price of the usual stuff that you purchase from them, per sack. At that, all 3 people are stunned at her words. A quarter price per sack? That's literally a godsend for the North. Sure, it's not cheap due to the ancillary costs, but it is not cutthroat in price compared to the usual stuff. Pricing that the North is usually forced to buy. With 1.25 to pay instead of the usual rates that they purchase from the merchants that travel by Riverlands and Reach, with an added tax from the bloody phrase. The money that the northern lords accumulate are sometimes not enough to feed properly the rest of the population. It's worse when winter comes and the price of food grains skyrocket, even more straining the already poor larders of the North, thanks to lack of harvest down south. Smirking at the rather stunned faces of the people in the room, Deliana Tully walks out of the hall, followed closely by her guard. Not after parting words, though. I do expect your hospitality while I'm here until tomorrow, Lord Manderley. Jon Snow watches in no small amount of fascination as the dock workers of House Manderley unload sack upon sack from the longboat, as one of the sailors that belong to House Tully calls it. At first glance, the boat seems unimpressive to the eye, long, narrow, and small. It also lacks a cabin that most ships have. Actually, in Jon's opinion, it is in his first opinion, simply a very large fishing boat. Once you look at the armament manning it, though, the large amount of cargo it carries, the banner of House Tully and Harrenhal alongside with the silver trout sigil, it is more than proof enough that this vessel braved the open sea from the south with its passengers and cargo intact. Impressive, aren't they? A sudden feminine voice makes Jon jump nearly 10 feet in the air, as it is though he just lands on his ass. A tinkling laughter follows, and Jon frowns as he looks at the source. A girl of maybe 12 or 13 is standing over him. It doesn't need a genius to know that she is highborn. She is not wearing a dress, but rather a form-fitting corset of dark violet that reaches to her outer thighs, and transparent wine-colored silk, covering everything else from her neck to her boots. Her hair is black as midnight, but with streaks of red on it, pale skin, and a cute nose. She's the most beautiful person the 7-year-old has ever seen. You're gawking, her comment snaps Jon out of reality, as he realizes that he has been staring. Shaking his head to get rid of the thoughts, he immediately forms his posture and bows. Apologies for my reaction, my lady. I am... Jon Snow, the infamous bastard of the Honorable Lord Stark, the girl finishes for him, making the familiar constriction at Jon's chest appear at the reminder of his status in life. And you are my lady? He asks rather stiffly before realizing his blunder. Bastards, after all, should never address highborn and familiarity. Lady Catelyn made sure he remembered that every time a visiting lord appeared at Winterfell. My lady, he begins to apologize, only to be cut off by the rather stern voice of the tall female bodyguard of hers. You are addressing Lady Deliana Tully of Harrenhal. You should know your place, bastard, hisses the one in dark leather, her sword slightly unsheathed, making Jon sweat at the sight, and the realization that he is addressing the daughter of another Lord Paramount. Of course he knows who Deliana Tully is, by name at least. He quite clearly remembers Lady Catelyn swearing to the high heavens the name of her father after she received the news that he sired a bastard, and even had it bastard daughter of Lord Tully. She, according to the bits and snippets that his father and Robb shared to him due to the isolation of the North from the South, is one of the most brilliant, if not the most brilliant person in the realm. Apparently at the age of 3, she went to the Citadel and studied there, the only woman that ever did. She also led the reformation of Harrenhal, transforming the once empty lands into a slowly developing lordship that was becoming the spice trade source of Westeros and beyond. She found the mineral of Delionite, which was deeply coveted by everyone. She invented new drinks, including the fire whiskey that all Northerners love. She won the War of the Feathers, as jokingly called by the other lords, when 3 houses of the Riverlands were infested with unknown wild animals. All in all, she was someone that Jon aspired, a bastard to a lady worthy of her title. At times, he sometimes envisioned that his father would ask King Robert to name him Stark, and he would do great and magnificent things that would make his family and house proud. But alas, until now, he is still Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell. Enough, Amelia. The firm tone comes from said Lady of Harrenhal. Go and help supervise the others from unloading our cargo. But my lady, I am your sworn blade. I cannot entrust your protection simply from... Now, the Lyanna cuts off, making the other young woman snap into attention, bowing once before walking off, leaving Jon, looking flustered, standing alone at the side of the dock with the now introduced Lady of Harrenhal. To his surprise, she smiled at him. My apologies, Jon Snow. Amelia can be rather protective of me. It is her first time as my guard, and her uncle, Lord Victor, is castellan of my castle, she says with an eye smile. She rather takes guarding me a bit overzealously. Understatement of the century, Jon thinks to himself, espying the older girl, eyeing them from afar, from where she is, with the rest of the Tully sailors. Turned workman. Still, I apologize, my lady, for addressing you so inappropriately and asking questions, he simply says. To his surprise, she laughs. Never apologize when it comes into increasing your knowledge. Young Snow, she replies. Now come, I asked for Lord Manderley's hospitality, and he gave me a room at the keep. He, however, neglected to give me a guide. Come and show me around, young Snow, before I die in boredom. Lyanna says, catching Jon completely by surprise as she entwines her arms with his. In instinct, he tries pulling off, but her grip, despite her graceful form, is like iron. Are you refusing a lady's commands, Jon Snow? She asks, her tone becoming sweet, extra sweet, that it sends the hair on Jon's butt stand in attention. Of course not, my lady. Come, he simply replies, walking to what he hopes is the right direction of the town square. He is just a bastard and deeply in trouble once either his lord father hears about this, or worse, Lady Catelyn. Where is Robb when you need him? He moans as he slowly heads to the center, he hopes, of the town, to show to her that weird merman statue. White Harbor, Inner Solar. The sound of the Inner Solar of White Harbor would normally be quiet and broken, only during the private conversations of the Lord Manderley of White Harbor. Currently, though, the silence is being broken with the sound of clinking utensils as 2 middle-aged lords sit on the table eating quite vigorously, mind you, from a pair of plates filled with rice. By the gods, I'm stuffed. Lord Wyman Manderley exclaims, finishing the last of his menu before eyeing morosely the now empty pan before turning his attention to the sack at the side. The other occupant of the room notices his attention before growling quite loudly, easily imitating the sigil of his house. Don't even think about it, Wyman. We are here to sample the product, not finish an entire sack all by ourselves. That's not fair, Ned. You know I want more. This little sample can barely fill me. Besides, it's my money that was used to buy all 900 of them, moans Wyman Manderley unhappily. On the outside, the Lord of White Harbor might be all pomp and orderly, but here on his solar where no one is listening or watching, he can be like young teens again with Lord Stark, or Ned as his friends called him when they're simply heirs before. Money that I'm refunding once I get back to Winterfell, growls Ned, finishing his own plate of rice with a side dish of black squid before exclaiming, quite happily, at the full feeling in his stomach. I'll happily waive off the refund if you give me 250 sacks of these. No! They're coming back to Winterfell with me. Fine greedy bastard, Wyman grumbles before taking 2 glasses filled with fire whiskey, giving one to Ned. The two raise them and drink them in silence, letting the nice fiery feeling burn in their gut. It seems the little lady is everything the rumors down south heard, eh? Chuckles. Lord Wyman, after a few minutes, everywhere she goes it says, people prosper. Now, here she is on our shores, grunts Ned, refilling his glass. Yes, here she is. Forgive if I may say, Ned, but I am rather looking forward to the future with her around here at White Harbor. Why so? Asks Ned. Lord Wyman Manderley only smirks. Because I see greatness in that girl, Ned. Trust me, when I say that, I believe that she'll outlast you and me. I propose that we agree to this trade agreement of hers. If it's everything she says, then we can be free of those greedy Southerners. Minus her, of course, from selling their overpriced crops to us. But if she's wrong or lying, asks Ned, then at least it'll be interesting to see how your lady wife box your ears off for trusting a bastard, exclaims Wyman, earning him a chuckle from Ned. They are rudely interrupted, though, from their drink, when the solar of Lord Manderley is suddenly shaken, nearly throwing the slightly puffed-up Lord off his chair. "What is that? An explosion?" exclaims Eddard Stark, hand immediately pulling ice from the side where it is leaning. The door, however, knocks 5 times hard, followed by another explosion. A guard in Manderley colors and dust appeared as it opened, bowing to the two of them, once before speaking, "My lords, we are being attacked by 5 ships bearing Ironborn colors." "Easy, easy," shouts the men as they slowly pull, using ropes and pulleys, the different finished parts on what is supposed to be a big house atop the largest archway of the hill castle. Down below, Matthew tries his damnedest to rack his head why in the world they are hauling the materials for a large house up there. It seems crazy, but gets crazy. At first, he thought it was a joke when they asked to pull atop the different archways of the hill, materials that would be needed for what seems to be round-roofed pavilions. Then they start hauling them quite literally, and Matthew was stumped. Still, he's ultimately glad Ellie is handling it instead of him. The last thing that he wants, once he gets back to Essos, is to be associated with a madman building a hill with houses instead of a real castle. He has to jump out of the way, though, as a rider runs past towards the temporary residence of Lord Victor in a full gallop. Wonder what that is about? There's never an urgency here ever since I came, he thinks before shrugging. Back to mocking the weird castle hill then. The sound of his men charging with their boats towards the shores of White Harbor is glorious for Captain Pike, also known as Pike the Picker due to his tendency to pick carefully the places that Ironborn raid before charging head-on. At least compared to some of the other captains, he does have a brain when it comes to raiding at least. The King of the Iron Islands, Balon Greyjoy, personally asked him to lead his 5 ships to attack this place. Their purpose is not to occupy it, but rather damage it enough that it would be unusable. It is, after all, the only place of the North that can muster a small semblance of a navy. Once they burn this harbor out, the North would be unable to muster its own ships in aid for the rebellion against the fat stag on the throne. It is a brilliant strategy for Captain Pike. The burning of this harbor would earn him glory for himself for successfully following his king, and at the same time, if he is lucky, find some worthy spoils here before hollering off in victory. "What is dead may never die," he roars to his men on the small boats, who repeated the phrase as they paddled furiously toward the burning docks. Already, the large ships on the docks are burning. They can burn the little ships later once they're done with the large town. White Harbor, Main Square. As Harry the Great, an all-around awesomeness, there are few times in his battle experience life that catches him off guard. Your survival instinct, after all, tends to be honed when a lunatic is after your life ever since you're a baby. It doesn't help that said reputation of lunatic is one of the darkest wizards of the age. The years that followed being a senior Ord and bane of many budding Dark Lords help. His life is one fight after another. Thus, when the first burning Bolestay came crashing on a house at the square where Jon was showing her the rather ugly rendition of a merman statue that looks more akin to a blob of stone, put together, even he was surprised for being caught by surprise. The explosion sent her flying to a nearby wall where she got the wind temporarily knocked out of her. Cursing herself for being caught with her pants down, Deliana shakily stands up as she wipes the soot from her eyes. The absence of conflict in this world has rather rendered her usually sharp instincts dull. It doesn't help that her focus for the past few years has been more onto building her power and reputation to their previous heights back at her old life. If I ever get out of this, I would be training this feeble body back to something worthy, she thinks to herself. Looking at the smoke-covered square filled with bodies of the dead and dying, she easily espies the black-colored head of the 7-year-old bastard of Eddard Stark lying on the ground, out cold a few feet away from the broken fountain. He may be Deliana Tully on this world, but her saving people thing has always been a part of Harry that he had come to accept so long ago. Running towards his form and deftly avoiding another burning scorpion bolt that reduced to ashes another nearby house and killing more civvies, she slids at his side and turning him over, placing a finger on his neck. She sighs in relief. The last thing that she needs is for Eddard Stark's bastard to die on her watch. As it is, though, they need to move. Even from here, she can see the ships bombarding the town with burning scorpion bolts. She mentally scowls as she sees their banners proudly etched on their ships' massive sails. The Kraken symbols on their sails are proof enough of what they are. Pirates, Ironborn, scum. People that she hated before and hunted in her previous life. Looking at the unconscious boy, she frowns. Normally she would cast a feather-like charm on him and carry him somewhere to safety. Unfortunately, right now, she is in unfamiliar territory, and just placing him at a wall side is hazardous, especially when pirates are soon to be running around. And that's not counting the firing ballista bolts, toppling houses front, right, and center. She might not like it, but there's only one thing she can do. Smack. ODWWWWWWW. The pained screech of Jon Snow echoes amidst the chaos that the invasion is causing on the town square. Get up, Jon Snow. We are being invaded, and I need you awake and attentive. Do you hear me? She hisses at the boy, pulling him to his feet. Once more, Deliana is mentally thankful of the aging potion that makes her body look 11 to 12, instead of the paltry 6 it is. The boy just looks at her in disbelief for a second, clutching his red cheek. You slapped me, he exclaims. Deliana just grunts at the accusation before standing up. Get to safety, boy. Whatever you do, don't go near the main roads and such. We are being invaded, and the last thing you want to be is to be at the thick of the fighting. Deliana is just about to run off at the direction, which she guessed 9 times out of 10 where the harbor is, when the small hands of Jon Snow grips hers, making her nearly drag him. As it is, he just face-planted at the muddy ground. What in 7 hells are you doing? Deliana demands, once more hauling to his feet the now muddy bastard. Why, you need a guide where you're going. The boy is barely coherent thanks to the mud that he spits out. I know where I'm going, Deliana sniffs dismissively. Why, you're going to the harbor, right? I know where it is. But aren't you afraid, my lady? He asks. Deliana nearly decks him at that question. She's Harry the Great, and she faced monsters more dangerous than a few paltry pirates with clubs. She chooses thus to simply ignore his question. Take me to the harbor, boy, and quickly. It is a stark reminder for Deliana of the chaos and war that follows humanity. No matter the world, no matter the place, suffering always follows its wake. And that's why people like her existed, to put out the fires before they can become an inferno that swallows. As she and Jon ran past the winding paths of White Harbor, already she can see the damage caused by the sudden attack of the Ironborn, burning houses and stalls, courtesy of ballista and trebuchet, firing from their ships. People are running back and fro, mothers grabbing children into safety, while the town guard like her are rushing to the harbor in a combination of armor and clothes jutting out. They obviously did not expect the attack. With Jon's guidance, she admits the boy is brave, knowing that they are running into danger, but still guiding her. The two of them finally reaches the docks. It is quite obvious, however, that despite the good time that she and Jon made, the Ironborn raiders have gotten here first. Dozens of small boats are parked at the wooden planks, and 30 or more so of the raiders are already wrecking havoc, massacring dock workers left and right with their axes and blades. There are a fair few harbor guards stationed here, but most of them are either dead or dying due to the lack of resistance. The only major resistance the raiders are facing are the small group that is slowly being pushed to the center of the town. Even from this distance, Deliana can easily espy the black-clad form of Amelia, slowly keeping the small band of warriors wearing the Harrenhal livery butchering any Ironborn that is brave or stupid enough to get near them. Deliana hadn't been stupid picking the crew for the 5 longships that traveled here with her. Despite wearing the usual surcoat that guardsmen usually wear, they are anything but guardsmen. Out of the 100 men that accompanied her here, 50 are the usual seamen that man the longships, while the other 50 is an assortment of former slave pit fighters from Essos, and daring adventurers who volunteer themselves. Basically men who are more at home fighting in leather armor and chainmail than the heavily plated knights, hand-picked men that would be able to fight on boats as naturally than they can fight in land. Hide inside that house, Jon Snow, and don't come out till the battle's over. Deliana points to an abandoned guardhouse. Bolt the door after you enter. But I want to help. Protests the 6-year-old with a stomp. Deliana almost smiles at that. The boy is Gryffindor. All right, brave, daring, and not too bright. Get inside there now, snaps Deliana, stopping the boy's protests as he stands ramrod straight. an entire life of conditioning to obey lords naturally compelling him to follow. Deliana breathes a sigh of relief as Jon Snow locks himself in the small guardhouse. This way he would be free of the incoming trebuchet and ballista fire burning White Harbor. The Ironborn would never fire near the docks in fear that they might hit one of their own currently making landfall here. It would be a lesser risk than leaving him back there where a stray ballista bolt might rip him in half or a crashing house fall on his head. With Jon now clearly out of harm's way, Deliana glares at the pirates. Time for her to do some cleaning of the vermin. Her first targets is the small group of 5 putting down one of the harbor guards with a spear at the gut. It does not take long for the 5 to notice her approaching form, for their victorious faces turn lecherous at the sight of her. Uncivilized dogs, serpents, sorcia. Deliana raises her right hand, and with a flash, a 3-meter-long python slams into the face of one of them, making him scream in terror. The smiles of their faces disappear immediately as the realization sets in that they are not facing a simple noble girl lost on her way to the docks. Sorceress, one of them whimpers only to gurgle as a piercing hex at the throat connects. The rest of the 3, realizing immediately that they are facing a magic user, disengages, leaving their fellow whose face is being devoured by the python to his fate. Deliana, however, does not have plans of letting any of them go in any way. Wingardium Leviosa, the spear from the gutted guard, removes itself with a bloody squelch before shooting like a bullet at the back of one of the Ironborn. He is dead before he even hits the ground. Aguamenti. The spell is simple, but proper placement and setting, and it can be dangerous. The water appears at the feet of the farthest fleeing Ironborn, making him slip up and crash to the ground. The fellow after him, too engrossed into getting away from her, trips over his head, killing him immediately, while at the same time falling down. Please. D, don't kill me. The last of the Ironborn begs, making Deliana sneer. All these evil people, they're all the same when they're the one at their backs. Always asking for mercy when they give none. She's gonna give them what they deserve. The dark, ripping curse tears into the man, making howl, as half his chest is eviscerated. It is a painful death, during which a moaning curse makes Deliana turns her attention away from the dead Ironborn to the source of the sound. Color her surprised, it's the dying harbor guard that they pinned before. He is glaring at her hatefully. The gods will have you witch. He hisses, despite his entrails coming out of him. Deliana mentally sighs. She has been too focused on gutting the worthless wretches that she kind of forget her reasoning why she doesn't use magic openly except in the presence of the green men. Not today, I'm afraid. She simply replies to the guard raising a hand. Avada Kedavra, the green-colored curse slams into his chest, killing him immediately. There is something wrong here. They do not have enough men. Deliana frowns as she sees the last of the Ironborn reinforcements arrive to help loot and put down the resistance at the docks, burning ships and nearby houses. This is untypical of pirate behavior, especially Ironborn. There is something here that she is missing. They usually raid, take whatever they can get, gold, women, children for slaves, then run away. Yet here they are, going the extra mile of wrecking the place. Winterfell, a roar that is more akin to a howl erupts from one of the roads, and Deliana stares as the form of Eddard Stark with Lord Manderly, followed by the rest of his household guards, slam into the north side at the closest Ironborn raiders. The Northern Lord looks every bit the Lord Paramount he is, face stern and strong, his eyes blazing with rage as he wields the great sword of Valyrian steel, cutting through steel and chainmail like butter. Seeing the emergence of this new threat, the Ironborn immediately raise their weapons as they shout their war cry before charging, despite being outnumbered 2-1. The remaining few of them that are still sinking the ships and burning the harbor double-timed it, giving credence to Deliana's suspicions about another purpose of this attack, other than reaving and raiding. She needs answers, and there's one way to get it. With a small murmur, a fire whip appears on Deliana's hands. Basically used against inferi if pumped with enough magic, it is more akin to a saw that cuts through anything and anyone. It's a massive cheat and necessary. Deliana might never admit it, but all this time that she has been here, she has neglected her skill when it comes to weapons of arms. It is basically second nature to her to trust on her magic for fighting and, frankly, forget until today that in order to defend herself without being labeled as a witch, she needs to know how to use a weapon. Even back then, as Harry after all, the mist she has when it comes with skill on medieval weapons is using the sword of Gryffindor against the basilisk, and even then it is a fluke. At least with an overpowered fire whip she can even the odds, plus the fire whip would look like a muggle weapon encased with fire. No one would suspect it is magic. Galena does not move. However, to the main battle, where Stark and his retinue are fighting the Ironborn, no. She instead turns towards the small group of 50 being led by Amelia, currently grappling with at least the same amount of Ironborn invaders. Lyanna fell under them like a firebolt, literally. Due to her looks, none of the Ironborn takes her seriously, and they paid for that with their lives. The fire whip at her hands strikes directly and true. Fueled by her magic, it cuts through steel, flesh and bone, with ease. The attacks she makes are simple, but fluid and precise. In instinct, men try to block and parry her attacks. They realize the futility of it too late, as the fire whip cuts through them like hot knife on butter. Screams followed with the sizzling smell of burnt flesh as bodies are torn apart in pieces at her advance. She's literally a one-man army as she focuses on attack alone. She gives no chance for the pirates to force her on the defensive due to the unwieldy usage of a whip in such a fight and her obvious lack of skill. As it is, though, her appearance and her rather sudden decimation of the enemy fighting force gives heart to her retinue who counterattacked, overwhelming the Ironborn with sheer force of numbers. By the end of the fighting, 10 of her soldiers are down with another 5 wounded. "My lady, you're all right?" The rather blood-soaked form of Amelia approaches her immediately, panting. "I'm sorry, my lady, that I am at not your side. I am—" "Enough! There is time for that later," Lyanna cuts her off with a raised hand. "How many of our longships survived the attack?" "The longships? My apologies, my lady. 3 are caught by the fires created by the Ironborn, while 1 other is half sunk. There is only 1 left." "That would be good enough. Gather the men, Amelia. Time is of the essence," orders Lyanna, making sure to conjure a regular whip that is supposed to be the fire whip she used before for the sake of any observers. "Gather them for what, my lady?" "Ironborn ship. Pike's pick." Captain Pike observes in satisfaction as White Harbor burns. Sure, it costed him a lot of men, but he knew that beforehand. Of the 400 Ironborn raiders that attacked the largest city in the north, less than 100 returned. Their purpose was fulfilled, though. The massive damage caused by bolts and trebuchets to the buildings and infrastructure would take years to rebuild. The entirety of its docks and harbor are also either destroyed or burning along with the majority of the ships. Once the rebellion of his king starts, there would be no help coming from the barbarians of the north. He sighs, feeling the aura of victory seeping through his bones. The rest of the 20 ships, manned by skeleton crewmen, had already left. Pike the Picker remains with 3 ships at the forefront to serve as honor guards while he memorizes every detail of the damage at the city that he can see with his eyes. Once he gets back to the Iron Islands, it would be a tale worth mentioning in their halls. His daydreaming, however, is broken as the familiar sounds of iron thudding into wood catches his ear's attention. It is a sound that Ironborn knows too well since they do it all the time when they board other ships. As he expected, the next sound is filled with war cries as men with the silver trout on a green field climbs up the right side of his ship and hastily engaging the skeleton crew with a vengeance. Pike can feel the first stirrings of fear at the sight. His skeleton crew, despite being worthy Ironborn, are still new. Some event their first time, with the majority of the veterans joining the attacking force beforehand. To me, what is dead may never die. Pike attempts to rally his crew to his side. To their credit, none of them jumped off in fear. Instead, they picked up whatever they could use as weapons before following his cry as they charged the rivermen. Surprise and shock, however, catches Pike by surprise. When the youngest of the attacking force, a girl of 12, he guessed, raised a whip over her head that immediately burst to fire, almost all of his men stopped, but Pike does not. He has seen many of the Fire God's followers at Essos conjure same parlor tricks. A whip on fire is still a whip, no different. He raised both his axes over each other to weather the fire whip's attack. The whip comes down, and Pike pauses as his arms feel incredibly lighter and feels a searing pain at his elbow below. His screams echo on the sea as he sees his cauterized stumps staring back at him. The fire whip had cut through both axes, flesh and bone, as its owner intended. Rice Point, former lands of Derry. Peak Harbor Master barks angrily at the delivery men for the umpteenth time for being late. Rice Point is always busy due to it preparing for being the center of grain trade to everywhere else. However, right now, the harbor town is busier 3 times more than normal as they prepare for the commands of the Castellan of Harrenhal. Dark Wings, Dark Deeds. The Ironborn has rebelled against the 7 kingdoms and had attacked all port cities that could threaten them. The king has called the banners, and that includes Harrenhal. Hoster Tully has also called the banners, but with direct orders to many to secure the castles near the coasts. For Harrenhal, the order is on hold since their lady is not here at the moment. Everyone is preparing, though. The Unsullied and their batch of trainees, almost 2,000 strong, are encamped outside Rice Point alongside the 3,000 possible levies that the Castellan provided with 40 knights from the different knight houses. However, the main source of business for Peak and the citizens of Rice Point are the dozens upon dozens of longships being made at the rivers under the supervision of Floki. They would be needed immediately once their lady returns and answer the call. Northern waters near the Iron Islands. A week after Sylvanas' return from White Harbor. For being such fast ships, the longships made by Floki are exceptionally quiet, their sails painted black to better hide in the night. Deliana watches the rest of the 50-plus fleet of longships sailing with her silently glide the waters, heading to Old Wyk, the seat of House Drum and the holiest place for the Ironborn. At this distance, she can see that the castle is mostly asleep. Why should they, after all, be alert? Apparently, the so-called Greyjoy Rebellion have ravaged nearly all of the major ports and towns of the 7 kingdoms. White Harbor is not the only one ravaged. The rich ports of Lannisport and the other ports of the Westerlands that house the Lannister fleet are also burned to the ground. The proud fleet of the Lions, comparable almost to the entirety of the royal fleet, are now burnt to cinders, reduced only to a paltry few. Currently, the only remaining fleets that can pose a challenge to the Iron Fleet are the Red Wine Fleet and the Royal Fleet itself, which is being reinforced daily by different ships from every remaining port in Westeros, by order of Stannis Baratheon, the Master of Ships. Everyone, of course, answered the call. The Ironborn are scum that is barely tolerated after all, and every lord worth his salt knows that with the Iron Fleet in control of the waters, no trade by sea is safe. For Deliana, however, she has to admit that this new conflict is a golden opportunity for her to build her reputation even more. Plus, the attack at White Harbor has just shown her some of the things that she does not notice in her life here, like her lack of skill about weapons. She has plans to rectify that in the future, but for now, she'll not waste this golden opportunity being offered to her.
Like everyone else, Lord Tully called his banners. However, not all of the forces of the Riverlands are deployed with the royal forces. Almost half are garrisoned at the coasts in the case of any Ironborn incursion. Deliana herself has sent almost the entirety of the levies with almost 100 longboats to Casterly Rock, where the royal fleet is gathering.
As for her, though, Deliana with the rest of the 2,000 Unsullied and 500 former pit fighters are here sailing towards Old Wyk, the seat of House Drum. Majority of her forces, after all, are deployed to aid the royal fleet. So her father could not complain much. Her status also in their eyes would not be that important as a waste, which would be said otherwise if she is a true-born daughter of Hoster Tully. Meh, it's their loss. The fortress of Old Wyk looms overhead, and Deliana can almost feel a feral grin appear at her lips. There is a good reason why none of the Ironborn are seeing them right now. First and foremost is the fact that the majority of the Iron Fleet is stretched thin, making lightning raids against the remaining ports of Westeros and taking the fight against the Red Wine Fleet to prevent them from linking up with the Royal Fleet. What's left here is a token force to defend the castle. Still, it would have been impossible to stay hidden coming here, if not for the Captain Pike that Deliana captured. Long story short, any man would sing like a canary with even the slightest bit of application of the intro expelling curse. Captain Pike has quite literally been very reliable on telling her this secret route that the Ironborn ships use on the go between the Iron Islands. Behind her, the 2,000 Unsullied and 500 pit fighters aptly grouped together, calling themselves the Death Dealers, serving as personal bodyguards for her, and Lord Victor stand in attention as they near the sandy bay at the side of the fortress, perfect for the long boats to ground themselves in silence. Delina has to admit that the commander of the Unsullied, a pale man with cut cropped hair with a permanent frown on his face, did good work. On the small amount of time he was given, he had already extended the number of the Unsullied from the original 500 that were brought to the 2000 that they are now. Sure, the newer ones might not have the iron discipline of the originals, but they are exemplary in obeying commands and following formations. The clinking of mail at her side and the hand grasping hers makes Deliana give off a comforting smile to Emilia, who is looking paler than usual. The Russian beauty, despite her courage and bravado, is obviously nervous, and Deliana can't fault her. This is her first large-scale war after all. The beach comes into view, and Deliana wears her helmet, a plain one like the Unsullied wears, in order not to make herself a target. There's no point in a sneak attack after all, and you are wearing all the bling that you possibly can. That's just asking for the enemy to plant a bullet, or in this case, an arrow on your forehead. It is the Unsullied who moves first. Their usual spears replaced with short swords, they move almost robotically as they disembark by the hundreds from the long ships that bear them. They are not but shadows as they ghost over the harbor of Old Wyk. Soon the muffled cries of the dead and dying citizens are the only whispers of the night as the god of war demands its bloody work. Deliana herself is one of the few that disembarks from the longboats last, with Emilia and 5 death dealers in tow. Suffice it to say that the citizens of Harrenhal were not the least pleased that their ruler risked her neck by flanking 20 men alone. Thus the new demand of theirs was given when Deliana opted to come with them here. She would be present, but only after the Unsullied and the death dealers finished off the last of the major resistance. The way they described it, there was only one of her, and they can't risk her dying on them. It is both touching and annoying for Deliana. Touching because they cared for her, like truly cared for her, and she does understand their worries. It takes one lucky shot to end a life, and she knows that hers is one that her followers dare not gamble about. While that is all great that they are protective of her, part of Deliana is annoyed. She is, after all, Harry Potter the Great, the man who conquered and all that. She can pretty well take care of herself. She's a Gryffindor. Through and through, though, with only the influence of Fleur Delacour and her sister that awakened the sneaky part of her. To not be at the forefront of a fight is almost like an unbearable itch for her. She has a role to play, though, and Deliana will play it well. What's the point of starting all this if she doesn't see it through, after all, to the end? The last of the moans of the dead, of the citizenry of Old Wyk finished, 20 minutes later, with a silent nod at Dragon Shit, who nods to her to that all is clear. Deliana walks the pathways of the thatched roofs of the small folk of Old Wyk. For the massacre that it is, it's almost eerily quiet and normal for anyone else. No bodies littering on the ground, no burning houses or blood pooling on the streets. The Unsullied did their work well. The castle of Old Wyk is foreboding in sight, made up of weathered stone, courtesy of the storms that enveloped the Iron Islands from the seas. As Deliana and the Death Dealers creep toward the main gate, where the rest of the Unsullied are already gathered. As she expected, there are no guards at the towers above the gate. It is the middle of the night, after all, and only the bravest or the stupidest of people would dare attack from the front gate. Any assassin or thief worth his salt would try the walls instead. Deliana, however, has something that they don't. Magic. Alohomora, her whisper at the back of the advancing army, is almost silent, but it does its job. The massive doors of iron and wood that would take at least a week for a battering ram to break opens on its own. Massive chains from the inside squeak open on its own as beams move as if having minds of their own. 2,000 men can never hope to crack open Old Wyk, even if it has 50 defenders holding it. 2,000 men, however, can tear the castle apart easy once its gates are opened wide. With a shout, the Unsullied with Dragon Shit at the lead interlock their shields, moving as squads to the courtyard and spreading out to the different parts of the castle. They no longer bother to hide the march of their boots or the loud commands. After all, the rather loud opening of the gates is enough of a warning to anyone sleeping. The bell above Old Wyk tolls in alarm as whatever watchman that remain jumps into action. Ironborn also come out of their beds in a combination of small clothes and leather armor in an attempt to defend their castle. It is all in vain, though. Unsullied and death dealers spread throughout the castle in their squads like a fire-eating dry wood. The unorganized and totally caught by surprise denizens of the castle cannot form a firm defense, as they are cut down one by one at the corridor of their own home before they can organize. Deliana herself marches forward with her own personal guard of 5. Once more, the fire whip appears in her hand, cutting open the one or two Ironborn that is lucky enough to avoid the roaming bands of unsullied and death dealers at the corridors. 30 minutes later, and Lyanna and her honor guard find themselves at the weather-beaten door of the welcoming hall of Lord Drum. With a powerful heave, the wooden hinges crack and splinter before giving way. The door fell at the ground with a crash. The 7 forms of Lyanna, her guards, and Emilia enters. Inside is Lord Duncan Drum, holding his family's sword aimed at her with 10 other Ironborn. "What is dead may never die, but rises up stronger than before," hisses the middle-aged man before uttering a war cry, as he, accompanied by his thugs, charge forward at her. Lyanna kinda appreciates the forwardness of him. The Dark Lords back at Earth love to monologue a lot about their evil plans before she tends to smack them all down in 7 different ways. Duncan Drum simply charges with 2 others at her, while the rest of the Ironborn challenges her personal guard. The fire whip slashes like a snake, and the 2 others supporting Lord Drum get the half of their heads flying in different directions. The Lord of Old Wyk, however, is much faster and brighter. He has ducked under Lyanna's attack before charging forward. Lyanna simply smirks, smacking the whip horizontally, planning on cleaving him in 2 from balls to brains as he raises his sword to block. Clang. Imagine Lyanna's surprise as the fire whip doesn't cut through the sword of the Lord of Wyk, but instead wraps around it. The metal on the blade, though, glows bright red, showing what seems to be crack-like made of fire. The moment's hesitation, however, is all that Lord Drum needs. With the whip wrapped around the blade, he pulls it forward, catching Lyanna off guard. As she is pulled, the next thing she knows is a blinding pain at her nose as a heavy fist makes contact with her nose, damaging it a lot. Everything spins before she feels the breath leaves her lungs as her back makes contact with the ground. She can feel blood flowing freely from her nostrils and blinding tears. Despite that, though, she can fully Lord Drum poised over her, sword ready to pin her to the ground. Before he can do the deed, though, a large spear connects with his chest, sending the man flying to the wall, where he is then pinned dead. My lady, are you alright?" The panicked voice of dragon shit she can hear at the background as hands pulled her to her feet once more. Lyanna can only laugh. However, as men start staunching the blood flow from her nostrils, she just realized she almost died. Casterly Rock, the Westerland. Ned hates war. He had thought that Robert's rebellion would be his and only major war to deal with. Even then, it was almost too much to bear. Now it seems the fates love to make a mockery of him by throwing him in another major war that would leave countless thousands dead. Now here he is, at Casterly Rock, where the rest of the prominent lords of Westeros are gathering their levies before they sail off to Pike and put an end to Balon Greyjoy's dream of an era of piracy. Of course not. The entire strength of Westeros can be found here. Majority of the Lord Paramounts brought fractions of their strength here only. The rest of their numbers had been deployed before at their coastlines in fear of another Ironborn incursion. The last thing that these lords want, after all, was to return home victorious and see their fortresses and holdfasts burnt to the ground and their families killed or worse. Ned himself had thankfully managed to pull quite a sizable force before coming here. He had ridden straight from White Harbor, with the majority of the men taken from several smaller houses near White Harbor. The Reeds also sent men to accompany him to the rallying of the king, alongside a large number of Mormont men with their heir, Jorah Mormont himself leading them. As expected, Great John Umber with many Umber men also came. The big man, after all, loved a good fight always, and together with some Glovers, Foresters, Karstarks, 100 men from House Bolton with Rose, their lord, and more from his own house. The force from the north is quite sizable. Eddard had to mentally thank his lucky stars about the delivered sacks of rice from White Harbor. It had taken him great effort to commandeer almost all, leaving 20 sacks of rice from a wailing Lord Manderly who had developed quite a taste for it. He admitted to himself that the bastard of Tully did not in any way disappoint about his expectations for the supposed new food source for the north. Not only did it taste good, but it did not spoil one bit from all the way their trek here. It also seemed to nourish them more than any fabled grain from the Reach. He spent the entirety of the ride here making mental notes on how to be able to procure more of this grain for the north in the future. Nevertheless, due to their availability of supplies and the lack of need from waiting all over the northern keep, his host had been one of the first to arrive here at Casterly Rock. Simple fact, though, Ned hated Tywin Lannister and anything that were related to that name. Thus, due to their punctuality, Ned Stark chose the farthest suite of room that he can find possible on the castle, away from the Old Lion and his ilk. It seems that Robert, who arrived a day after him, also had the same opinion, for he happily rejected the Lord's suite offered by Tywin and chose the set of rooms beside Ned's. Now here he is above one of the open parapets of Casterly Rock, where a huge table is set. Apparently, Robert enjoys the crisp, clean air here. That is a major change from the stink of shit and piss that is King's Landing. Together with them are the other lords and their representatives leading the royal army. There is Lord Royce representing the Vale, some low lord from the south representing the Martells, the Lump, Mace Tyrell with Randall Tarley in tow, Brynden Tully from the Riverlands alongside Lord Victor, who is leading almost 3,000 from Harrenhal, and its attending lands, comprising the bulk of the army of the Riverlands. The man is old, but looks cold and calculating with frigidness that is almost statue-like. Compare him to Tywin, and it would be like two lions facing off one another. Of course, majority present in the long table is Tywin Lannister himself and other important lords of the West. He cannot blame them for their grim faces as they stare at the large map of Westeros at the middle of the table. The Westerlands are the richest among the Seven Kingdoms, and thus they were the one where the hammer stroke fell hardest from the first forays of the now called Greyjoy Rebellion. They were hungry for revenge, and Eddard Stark understood that feeling all too well. Everyone rise in the presence of the king. The shout of the page makes everyone stand up as the lumbering fat form of Robert makes its way to the large chair prepared specifically for him. Once more, Eddard mentally winces at the form of his best friend. The years, it seems, has not been kind to Robert. With him is his brother, Stannis, looking like a walking statue with all the expression he's showing from his face. Let this be recorded that. Let's bloody get on with it. The booming voice of Robert cuts off the page, who made a squeak of fear before going silent. What is our plan to put the fucking squids into their place? He directed his question at Stannis. The younger Baratheon simply stands, face aloof. Already this war has shown that Stannis is a natural commander. He had saved the Red Wine fleet by smashing the part of the Iron Fleet, besieging them at the rocks using elements of the Royal Fleet, and ships from the Houses of the Stormlands, not wanting to waste the opportunity to strike the Ironborn at the rear. It worked splendidly, and now the Red Wine fleet numbers are added to the Royal Fleet, currently docked at Casterly Rock. We gather all our levies on all available ships. We head directly to Pike, and we crush the main seat of the Greyjoys, declares Stannis. The Iron Fleet is the strongest fleet of Westeros, my lords. Currently, however, they are spread out all over our coasts, raiding and pillaging. We do not have the time nor the resources to hunt them one ship at a time, so we draw them in. He takes all the sigils at the map and placed it directly at Pike. We cannot find them, but we can force them to come to us. They cannot afford to lose the capital of the Iron Islands, and the seat of their king, after all. I like this. This way the war would not be prolonged, and will give us time in the long run to repair our damaged shorelines, murmurs Tywin in agreement. It would be one pitched battle instead of 100 ones all over. We will have also the numbers advantage. We need to be wary of the other parts of the Iron Islands, though, Brynden points out, especially Old Wyk and the Ten Towers. Last I checked, those places have large harbors and are naturally defended. The last thing we need is lightning raids at our flanks by Ironborn ships before confronting the strength of the Iron Fleet. Then we crush and sack the islands before heading to Pike. Robert booms. We will bring them down on their heads, one castle at a time, before we put old Balon into his rightful place. That would not be necessary, Your Grace. Everyone turns towards the source of the voice, which is a man in maester robes near the entrance. Maester Craylan, Tywin says in recognition, "What do you mean when you said that?" he asks. "Exactly as I said it, my lord," the maester replies with a bow, before taking a piece of folded thin paper, before turning to Robert. "I have news, Your Grace, from Lord Varys of King's Landing. Old Wyk and the 10 towers of the Iron Islands has fallen, Your Grace, and the banners of the Tullys are now flying on their fortresses." Tullys? What is the meaning of this, Sir Brynden? Robert demands at the stunned knight, who raises his hands in confusion. "I swear by the gods I have no idea what this is. I seem to recall my brother not sending any party to attack the Iron Islands," he answers. "Then whom? booms the king. Diliana Tully, your majesty. The slight mocking tone of Lord Victor, who has been quiet the entirety of the meeting, says, making everyone turn to the blue-eyed, pale Castellan. My lady had taken 2,500 of our best men and did exactly what she said she would to those houses that dared attack our men. And what is that? Eddard Stark asks, surprising even himself, for speaking out. Justice, my lord, justice, the Castellan simply replies. In her entire life, Diliana has never seen a real-life naval battle. Sure, the Muggles have a lot of movies about ship warfare, but in her entire career of battles, duels, and even once, open warfare, Diliana has never been in one. The closest she got on fighting in a ship is wrestling Gregory Goyle Jr., Dark Lord wannabe from an escape boat after ramming it with a yacht. It is a very different experience watching hundreds of ships duke it out in open water. After her taking of Old Wyk and the Ten Towers, the royal fleet is basically given a free passage to sail right into Pike's waters. This, of course, prompted the Iron Fleet, scattered all over Westeros, to return home lest they risk the downfall of their newly declared capital. Due to their skill in sailing and naturally knowing every nook and cranny of these waters, the ships of the Iron Fleet managed to muster a large number of themselves in defense. The rest of their ships, too far to make it back in time, grouped themselves into small wolf packs that nipped the flanks of their attackers. Compared to them, the royal fleet is large, cumbersome, an assortment of vessels from every house, with most manned by green boys who never experienced sailing. However, what it lacks in skill and severity, it makes up for it in numbers. The Iron Fleet is outnumbered 3-1 before the battle is joined. Diliana personally wonders whether the commanders of the Iron Fleet are either dumb or too overconfident as they face the much larger and more equipped force directly. She has to give credit to the Ironborn, though. Their reputation is well earned about sea battles. The entirety of the vanguard of the Royal Fleet buckles hard as ships go down by the dozens on the first salvo of the attack, either rammed or boarded before left to sink with their crews dead in moments. It is plain, however, that the Royal Fleet is just too large for the Iron Fleet to tackle by itself. Like the jaws of an alligator closing around, the rest of the forces of King Robert surrounds the Iron Fleet, stuck fighting the vanguard at the middle before closing in for the kill. Of course, things might have different. If Diliana did not manage to capture Old Wyk and the Ten Towers, the Royal Fleet would be harassed to pieces by even more wolf packs and will need to spend life and resources to taking down the two islands before facing the Iron Fleet, which would lead to even more casualties on the final battle, even the possibility of defeat. The only thing that the Iron Fleet can do to prevent the defeat into an utter disaster is to break through the already weakened vanguard, which they of course are now doing. It is the moment that Diliana has been waiting for. With a wave of her hand, the horn sounds, and out of the gloom of Old Wyk, the black sails of 100 longboats are opened wide, showing the silver sigil of House Tully in full display. The 100 ships sail directly at battered ships of the vanguard, and Diliana smirks. She has not been all idle after her taking of Old Wyk and the 10 Towers. The latter she ordered burned to prevent any usage after clapping its inhabitants in chains. At least those that surrendered before retreating here at Old Wyk. Of course, seeing the danger that she poses and the advantage of regaining back the castle, a large number of Ironborn from Pike sailed using small boats to retake the castle in King Greyjoy's honor. Suffice it to say that they get a complete reenactment of D-Day as they are peppered by arrows, spears, and large missiles, thanks to Diliana's forces commandeering the ballistae available at the towers of Old Wyk. Dragon Shit and the Unsullied under his command had even created a makeshift trebuchet, which they used to great effect. Of course, Diliana added her own special touch. She discreetly enchanted the sandbar that they landed at beforehand with a mild sticking charm. Suffice it to say that moving in would be like moving your legs in jelly. Not exactly a prescribed method when you have enemies hailing arrows of death at your head. Suffice it to say, the result is a lot of dead Ironborn who did not even make it to the castle. There are no more attacks after that. Whoever it must be that is commanding the Ironborn realizes that he must save his men for the battle against the royal fleet, than wasting them trying to take back a castle that they can simply assault later, once they're done with the royal fleet. Joke's on them at that one. Diliana has hidden her own fleet in the dark caverns of Old Wyk, just for this very moment. As she and her ships, however, rushes towards the panicking Ironborn ships at the sudden emergence of another fleet bearing down against them. Lyanna frowns at something she just is noticing. The king, she hears, loves a good fight always. That's the reason why he hosts such extravagant tourneys. It reminds him of the battlefield that put him in the throne. So why in the world is the king's ship standing so far away from the battle? And are those Ironborn ships sailing from the fog behind the king's ship? Robert Baratheon's ship. No one could ever doubt that Robert Baratheon is a great warrior and a seasoned commander. He, after all, challenged and brought down a dynasty that ruled for centuries on the first try. However, right now, he sits on the throne of his ship by his own volition, and even personally gave the order that the king's vessel be far away from the battle as possible. There is good reason for that, after all. Even the best and proudest of warriors would never dare put themselves in harm's way if there is any telltale sign that their children would be put in danger. Also alongside them. Thus here Robert sits watching the royal fleet, commanded by his brother Stannis, clamp the Iron Fleet with the jaws of his own ships. Her personally would have preferred also fighting beside him. He is a Stormlander, after all, and doesn't have sea legs that most Westerosi lords suffer from when fighting in the sea. It would give him joy to finally be able to swing his hammer, but he would not. He could not, and for good reason. He stares at the small figure of his daughter sitting beside him in the small chair provided for her as the battle in front rages on. To say that Robert is livid would be an understatement. Even with all his chubbiness, Robert Baratheon's wrath is a scene to behold as one of the captains of the Stormlander ships brought to him his wayward daughter. Apparently, she hid in one of the empty barrels, used basically for storing fresh water in the last of the Stormlander ships, that docked in King's Landing for resupply before sailing here to reinforce the royal fleet. Next time I see that boy, I'm gonna give him a belting that he won't forget. Robert thinks to himself darkly, the reason that Myrcella hid herself away in one of the ships is apparently in order to get away from Joffrey. Robert, even in his few moments of soberness, noticed this trend. Not really putting an effort on discipline, his son. It doesn't help that Cersei's insistence that her golden lion is just testing his paws convinced even him of his son's cruel behavior. He plans to do something about it. It must be bad if Myrcella prefers to sail away to a battlefield rather than stay one more minute at the Red Keep. While part of him is terrified for the safety of his daughter, part of him is proud. As he observes her now, he can't help but nod in silent approval. Despite being deathly afraid, she is 6-year-old after all. She doesn't shy away from the sights and the sounds of the battlefield. A true Baratheon indeed. If she is born a man, he might have been someone that Robert would groom personally. Alas, she's a girl, and despite how much he loved her, she would never inherit the throne. Robert's musings, however, is broken when the alarm bells sound from the top of his ship. Alarm immediately courses through him. An alarm like that can only mean one thing. Where are we under attack? He roars, grabbing his hefty warhammer as he stands up from his throne. The King's Guard around him also leapt into action, drawing their swords. The rest of the Lord Paramounts, or their representatives, also stand alert. At the rear, Your Grace. 5 Ironborn ships are spotted coming out of the fog. It bears the symbol of House Arg. Arg. The lookout atop the crow's nest never finished his words as a giant ballista bolt snaps into the prow, snapping it like a twig. To arms! Protect the king. The booming voice of Ned Stark shouts, and every available soul inside the ship rushed to grab anything that they could use as a weapon. Robert turns, however, at Sir Barristan. Bring my daughter to my personal cabin and lock the door. Protect her at all cost, he booms out. The old King's Guard looks ready to protest before a stern countenance fell upon him. Yes, Your Grace, I will guard her with my life, he says with a bow, before calling 2 men-at-arms to help him carry the Princess Royal to the safest part of the ship. Robert, on the other hand, simply readies his warhammer as he stands beside Ned and the rest of the Lord Paramounts. Just like the good old days, eh, Ned? He chuckles confidently despite his personal feelings. Robert, more than anyone after all, knows that he is not the same warrior as he is before. After his chubbiness evolution, the Wolf Lord simply nods in grim silence as he readies his greatsword Ice. It does not take long for them to encounter their foes. 5 Ironborn ships emerge from the fog, 2 rushing and trapping the 2 ships guarding the King's ship, while the rest tackles the King's vessel with ropes and grappling hooks. The first of the ramp connects, Two Baratheon sailors rush immediately to try and push it away, but they never manage it as a screaming man bisects them with a crazed look in his eyes. Robert knows who he is. Immediately, Euron Greyjoy, the unhinged madman of a brother of the current king of the Iron Islands. With the felling of the two guards, the rest is a mad rush as Ironborn spill into the ship, hacking and screaming at anyone that is not them. With a war cry, Robert rushes forward, Warhammer swinging over his head with the High Lords of Westeros behind him. Fat or not, the strength that made Robert kill the Dragon Prince is not fully gone. The first two Ironborn, who is his target, lasted seconds as his Warhammer bashes their brains out like a piñata. He blocks a slash from another Ironborn before kicking him in the chest that sent him overboard. One tried to get up close and personal, but with a headbutt, he fell down, screaming, clutching his bloody nose before his chest is caved in by Robert's Warhammer. His instinct makes Robert react to the Ironborn, ready to impale him with a dirk from behind. He moves too late, and he thought himself a goner before the form of Eddard Stark appears, cutting the man's head in two, covering the king's rear. His bodyguards also appear, reinforcing the king. Robert smiles at his friend grimly before charging in once more to battle, but this time with Eddard Stark's support. All around the ship is chaos, as Ironborn struggles against the people inside the king's ship. Renly is being protected by 5 of his guards, and Tywin is fighting too with the rest of the Tyrell bannermen he rallied. The Lord of Highgarden is lying on the side, his face all blue and purple, courtesy of an Ironborn that punched repeatedly, a soft, very punchable face. The rest of the Lannister guard are dead alongside one of Robert's Kingsguard. The Martell representative is also dead, with his head being carried around by Euron Greyjoy, while the rest of the ship's crew and guard are being rallied by Lord Victor and Brynden Tully, with Lord Royce currently missing after an Ironborn kicked him overboard. With a mighty roar, Robert, once more, bashed 3 people aside before hooking a battle axe with the heft of his warhammer, before pulling the unfortunate user closer to him, up close and personal. Robert punched his face before stepping on his balls. With a pained squeal, he raised his hand protectively before the end of his life as Robert smashed his brains out. Taking a breather, Robert looks around and knows that they are in deep trouble. He is already tired from this small skirmish. His years of debauchery doing him no favors. The rest of the ship's defenders are being overwhelmed one by one, with the only strongest groups remaining belonging to his Lord Tywin's, reinforced by Renly and his men, Sari Brynden, and those black-clad bodyguards of Lord Victor, and is alongside with Lord Starks. More Ironborn are pouring in from the 3 ships, fresh while they are already bloody and soaked. Fat King! The sudden shout and insult from Euron Greyjoy makes Robert turn his attention to the madman. He immediately wishes he didn't, though, for the Pirate Lord is there standing bloody with his men, while at the same time holding aloft on one army a crying Myrcella. One of his men is hauling a bloody form of Sarabaristan, badly wounded, unconscious, and his golden armor rent in many places. "Don't you dare lay hands on my daughter!" booms Robert, ready to charge, but pauses as Iron draws a dagger over the crying 6-year-old's throat. Already, the fighting around them is coming to a pause as everyone starts to slowly realize that Euron has the king's daughter in hand. "Jaime, no!" An angry grunt from Tywin Lannister makes Robert turn his attention to the Kingslayer, red at the face in anger, being stopped by 2 of the Baratheon guards of Renly and his father. "Put down your weapons or the girl gets it," orders Euron Greyjoy with a mad sneer, putting his dagger on the cheek of the sobbing princess. "Put down my daughter, you fucking..." Now, with an angry yell, Robert drops his hammer with a loud thud before looking at the rest of the defenders angrily. "Put down your weapons, damn it," he roars at them. With reluctant movements, one by one, the weapons are thrown, done with Tywin Lannister being the last. A triumphant grin now adorns Euron Greyjoy's face. "Look at that. The fat stag and his animals all now my prisoners. I finished something that my dumb brother at the throne could not. I brought down the king of the 7 kingdoms and all his lords. Put my daughter down now." "Damn it," roars Robert, moving forward, only to be whacked by the flat side of an Ironborn axe, sending him sprawling on the mast. "Why would I do that, Fat King? After all, your daughter would make a fine salt wife for me," answers Euron with a sneer before slowly ripping the small dress of Myrcella Baratheon from her small sleeves. "Bastard!" The shout comes from the Kingslayer, but a thud made him pause as a crossbow bolt is shot through his shins, making him sprawl on his face. Robert tries once more to stand and charge, but an Ironborn brained him a second time before forcing his head to look at Euron slowly tearing through the sleeves of his daughter, who is crying for him to help her. "I'll kill you for this. I'll kill you for this, damn it." Robert curses despite the blood on his face. Right, now for the final part, the grand unrevealing. The pirate raises his knife to cut through the center of the small princess's dress, when a flaming whip out of nowhere cut through his wrist, making the Greyjoy squeal as his arm is cut off through the wrist, making him drop the crying princess, who immediately rushes toward him as he rolls on the ground in agony. To his credit, his best friend moves fast. The moment the scream from Greyjoy starts, he picked up his weapon, ice at the ground, and cuts off 3 Ironborn heads with one strike. The rest of the defenders also moves at the sudden change in the air as they fight back, some even with bare hands. Not one of them, however, is fast enough to stop one of the Ironborn grabbing the princess halfway through her run before making a dash for one of the ships entangled with the king's vessel. Bastard Robert roars, forgetting his warhammer as he charges instead with his hunting knife in pursuit. Unfortunately, his weight goes against him, and he watches in trepidation as the man makes it to the side, only to be stopped by that very same fire whip that separated his head from his body. He drops the crying Myrcella to the ground, which Robert rushes towards, until he is, however, beaten by the figure of a 12-year-old girl that appears from the side of the ship, hugging the princess to herself. Other than her, black-clad figures of Unsullied also jumps from the side of the ships, attacking the Ironborn with silent efficiency and driving them off from the defenders. Robert, however, cares for nothing of that as he approaches the figure hugging Myrcella, who is clinging like a wart to her, wailing loudly. "Feth, who are you?" huffs Robert, his words barely understandable through the few minutes of panic and beatdown. The 12-year-old looks at him straight without any sign of fear or wonder, streaks of red adorning her black hair. "Deliana Tully, your grace, Lady of Harrenhal. In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the innocent. Arise, Deliana Tully, a dame of the 7 kingdoms." As Deliana rises to her feet, the cheers immediately sounded, nearly deafening her, coming from everywhere. She has to smile as she stands before the king, taking the sword offered by King Robert himself. It is a great gift. Nightmaker is its name, one of the very few Valyrian swords found on the treasury of the Red Keep. Robert Baratheon's personal gift to her. Suffice it to say that her rescue of Princess Myrcella made a much bigger impact than Deliana ever thought. Her original objective was to simply aid the king's vessel by ramming the nearest Ironborn ship tapered to it. Color her surprised when she noticed Euron Greyjoy, of all people, holding a knife on Princess Myrcella, and was loudly threatening how he will make the small 6-year-old his salt wife. His fate was then sealed. Deliana, after all, hated above all else murderers, rapists, and cutthroats. Unfortunately, the murderous bastard managed to survive by throwing himself overboard. Deliana mentally prayed that the sharks would get him. He was, after all, bleeding profusely. Robert Baratheon, however, was nearly apoplectic with relief as he literally crushed Deliana's spine alongside his daughter's with a bear hug that sent her ribs crying in alarm. The Kingslayer also looked extremely relieved, almost as relieved as the king. The smile he gave her and the handshake was also very genuine and contains no sarcasm or snide comment that the Lannister was prompt to do. Suffice it to say that the rest of the battle to put down the Greyjoy rebellion was completely uneventful for Deliana. Apparently the rest of the lords, and the king included, despite being thankful, concluded that she contributed way too much already on the campaign and had elected that she be the personal guard and caretaker of Princess Myrcella for the duration of the rebellion. The king, after all, vehemently refused to send the princess back to King's Landing via ship after what just happened. Thus, in an ironic way, the royal cabin was transformed into her personal quarters alongside Myrcella's. The king, on the other hand, along with the rest of the lords, minus Tywin and the almost unrecognizable Mace Tyrell, transferred to other ships, kept it on the deck to give the ladies some space. Renly almost transferred ship in order to find a cabin for himself, but Robert put his foot down, demanding that the dandy fop put some backbone on being a man. Thus, Lyanna remained there most of the time as the royal forces finished off Greyjoy's rebellion. While she might have enjoyed joining the charge for Pike, she instead allowed Lord Victor the honor alongside Dragon Shit to lead her men in. She, after all, had bigger fish to fry. Myrcella was inconsolable after her ordeal, and Lyanna can't blame her. She, after all, had been threatened to a fate worse than death, and had more times than she can count, had a knife prick in her skin. For a 6-year-old, that was a terrible thing, and Lyanna was more than happy to keep her company. She had seen how such traumatizing things damaged the psyche of veteran warriors in the field. It would be worse for Myrcella. She was no mind healer, but she did know that leaving the little girl alone in the dark would be the last thing that the princess needed in order to cope with it. She will never get over it, but she can survive. Thus, Lyanna almost spent the entire time with Myrcella at their small personal cabin. She would keep her company, asked her about herself, play games with her, let her do her interests with her as a friend, and what Myrcella loved the most, she loved listening to stories. Of course, seeing that Lyanna was the 21st century, the stories she knew were none like the one in this world. Thus, what she told was an abridged story of Star Wars. Myrcella loved it, and she was almost fully distracted from her ordeal most of the time. Thus, while the two of them spent their times in peace at the royal cabin, Pike burned and the rebellion was put down. Robert, however, did not show his gratitude until they finally returned at King's Landing, where the victory banquet awaits. When asked for any boon, Lyanna asked to be knighted, not of course for the prestige or the idea of riding around the countryside saving peasants, but rather because of two things. One, she had seen the different armies of the other kingdoms of Westeros in this campaign, and she had to admit that her forces, despite being good and fair in number, were wholly inadequate of dealing with them in the case of some ambitious Lord Paramount. Once more attempt to make the Riverlands their battlefield, she needs her entire population galvanized. Already many of the womenfolk back at Harrenhal and tending territories were starting to question the norm of the man-dominated country. She needed to show them that it's alright to be of the fairer gender and still achieve the same things that a man can. Not only would this give her higher recruitment rate to the Unsullied Legions, but production output can be maximized, which would be needed in the coming years. 2, other than stroking her ego of being the first female knight of Westeros, she needed the High Lords to see her. Respect and fear, after all, were the two things needed to be an effective ruler. The respect she already gained by taking Old Wyk and the 10 Towers plus saving the king's daughter. They need to see the latter. They need to know that she's not breaking out of the social norms of Westeros. A legitimized bastard that not only became a lady of a great castle, but also a knight worthy of her title. Personally, she just wished that with her ascension, she would attract the rest of the bastards of many lords to her. Nothing, after all, can bring moths together than a flame. She already has plans for that. The sword, however, is an unexpected gift from Robert. He must be very grateful to her for him to be freely giving a 3 million dragon worth of weapon to her. Now she has 3 swords in her possession: Red Rain, Nightfall, and Nightmaker. Lyanna personally takes pleasure on seeing the other High Lords grinding their teeth to dust for a bastard to be given such gifts and honor. Let the feast begin! Robert's booming voice echoes on the archway as the entirety of the Red Keep cheers. It seems, however, that Robert's enjoyment of feasts is not exaggerated. Food is aplenty, with a 7-course meal for the lords to enjoy. Wine is also flowing, and Lyanna more than once spots delicacies and drinks that Harrenhal imports. On the other hand, a lower and moderate feast is given to the commoners outside. Lyanna is just ready to follow the other lords of the Riverlands to where her father is sitting when Myrcella's small hand clasps hers. Princess? Lyanna smiles at the sight of her. Decked in gold and black dress, the princess's attire is a stark contrast of her wine-red suit and pitch-black pants. She might have opted for a dress for the festivities, but seeing that she's breaking the norm of becoming a knight, she decides to go all the way, even attire-wise. Come sit with me, Delia. Myrcella beams. Your princess commands it, she says, then, in a commanding squeaky tone, her face scrunching up in a cute way. She looks so adorable. Are you sure that your parents would mind? Lyanna asks, looking at the raised table where the rest of the royal family is sitting. The queen might have looked gorgeous if not for the rather unpleasant scowl on her face, as if she's smelling shit right under her nose. The king, on the other hand, is already busy with his cups and is clapping the back of Ned Stark at his right hand alongside Jon Arryn. The Lord of the Vale is even more old and thin than Lyanna imagined. At the king's left is Joffrey, the crown prince after his mother's seat, busy carving the head of a cooked pig with a carving knife. At his side on a smaller chair is Tommen, eating porridge from a small bowl befitting his age. It is at Tommen's side that Myrcella leads her. Taking the seat at the farthest end of the table beside Myrcella's, Lyanna has to admit that it feels awesome sitting here at the king's table. Despite herself, she can almost feel smug at the jealous and angry looks that the other lords are throwing at her. Her interest, however, disappears from them as Myrcella starts offering her different assortments of food. Private royal quarters 5 hours after the end of the victory feast.
You little shit.
Before Joffrey knows what's going on, the large hand of his father connects with his perfume-covered face, making Joffrey literally see white as he is hurled to the mat. He can taste something coppery from his lips, and his eyes widen as he realizes that it is his blood. Father, what is going? He never finishes his words as a backhand sends him sprawling on the opposite direction, this time scrambling like an animal. Several of his gums are already bleeding, and he stares in abject terror at the fat king who is looming over him, red-faced due to drunkenness and rage. Robert, what is Oh, Joffrey! What the fuck are you doing, Robert? Screeches an enraged Cersei, rushing to Joffrey's aid. He has never been so glad to see his mother. He almost got his sister killed. That's why, roars the Stag King, approaching again, large meaty hands reaching for him. In instinct, Joffrey recoils, but his mother bats away his hand with a screech of her own. He is just a boy? What are you talking about? She hollers angrily while hugging Joffrey to her chest. He would never hurt a fly? He bullied his sister that she had to hide herself in my ship and almost got herself killed by Euron Greyjoy, roars the king, and stop defending him. He is my son and I want him disciplined. It is not Joffrey's fault. Myrcella is overreacting. I'll talk to her and tell her to tell the truth that with a loud bull-like roar, Robert lunges at Joffrey only to be stopped this time by his Kingsguard by pulling him back. Your Grace, he is your son and you're drunk, hisses Ser. Aerys Oakheart at the red-faced, pudgy king who seems to finally regain his senses. Bah! Discipline him, woman, or else. I'll do it for you, he growls angrily before walking off. The faint shouts of Lancel's name to bring him some wine echoes on the corridor. As his mother hugs him to herself, Joffrey glares angrily at the fire, face bloody and bruised. Myrcella would pay for being a snitch and for causing him to be hurt by their father. He would bid his time before striking on the morrow. Nobody could cause him to get hurt and get away with it. Lannister Manor, Red Keep. Lady Lyanna, it is good to see finally the face behind all the letters. The rich baritone voice of Tywin Lannister greets as the young Lady of Harrenhal enters his private solar. Lord Tywin Lannister, the pleasure is all mine, is the girl's rich reply with only a bowing of her head. He mentally smirks at the fact that she does not bow from her waist. But the girl has pride, something that he approves of personally. I must admit that your manor looks beautiful, my lord. Though I expect someone of your stature to be staying at the Red Keep, not at the wealthy district of King's Landing. Oh, and why do you think I stay here so? Nay, I, she indicates the chair in front of him, which Tywin nods in affirmation. With a sigh, she sits down, clasping her hands in front of her, green eyes blazing. This is the capital of the Seven Kingdoms, my lord, which means every nook and cranny in the Red Keep would be within earshot of anyone's spy in the castle. It would not be a problem if you are Hand of the King. Like before and you have free reign and control of the servants and had enough of an idea about who goes where and such, you do not know where to speak there at the moment. Or rather, when to speak without anyone getting an idea of your proper motives. Unlike here, where you bought the space and area, you have time to flood this large manor with your own servants you personally handpick and trust. At least to an extent. You can also post as much guards here as you wish, without anyone protesting too much, since you are a Lord Paramount and your safety is important. Interesting. And is that all? Tywin asks with a smirk. Personally, he is already impressed. It seems that this lady of 6.5 years old and looking way too mature past her age knows how to play the game. Not exactly, my lord. I've taken notice of the way this manor of yours is designed. Simple, one way in, one way out with one gate and a small wall. At least for the knowledge of those who enter the first time. In the event that you might be attacked at this city, you can take shelter here. The wood of those gates might look rich, but those are made to last, and the gates and doors have extra locks on them. This place is basically a small fortress, a place where you can hold on to if ever your interests at the capital are threatened. I would bet that somewhere around here is a hidden hallway known only to your or your household staff. For it would be folly to trap yourself here and slowly starve in such an event where you are besieged. Tywin Lannister leans back on his chair, saying nothing. It seems that the rumor about the bastard of Tully is no rumor after all. Clever, courageous, and cunning, she would have made a great Lady of the Rock. If she is a little older, he might have considered marrying her off to Jaime once he succeeds on convincing his fool of an heir to stop being a glorified bodyguard. But alas, she's too young, and Jaime would rather watch the fat king fart himself to death than fulfilling his duty to his family. Still, it's not as if there's an opportunity to bind her closer to his family without being too obvious. The relationship currently is pure business after all, and it would not do to alienate the brilliant young girl this early. He needs her to trust him more, plus he needs some of that Dillionite that the Iron Bank is hoarding like a miser. He cannot compete against them in the auctions of Harrenhal, damn it. I have considered the letter that you sent me before pertaining the stay of the Princess Myrcella at your lands, says Tywin, looking at her, who looks nonplussed at his presence. Most lords and ladies would be fidgety already, but not this one. Good. And I guess that you are planning on agreeing on it, if not agreed to it already, else you might not have called me here, points out Deliana, making Tywin's lips twitch upward. Brilliant indeed. Yes, I do agree on your proposal. The Princess Myrcella will foster under your care until her first moon. Then it would be up to her to decide on the course of action for her life. Up to her? You mean up to you, rather, or up to her father, says Deliana with a raised eyebrow. I meant what I said. It would be up to her. She'll be learning after you, and I have no doubt that the meek and impressionable princess that we have now would be a different person once she returns. I do not doubt, after all, that you would let her remain as she is. Would you, my lady? No, I would not. She replies simply. All right, then it's settled. When will you send her to Harrenhal, my lord? A moon from now or earlier, depending on her desire of farewells to her family. Also, I would like to give you this to give to her once you think her ready for such an artifact, such as this. Tywin takes the box he prepared beforehand, placing it in front of him. He watches in no small amount of satisfaction as she opens the box, her face morphing to one of surprise and wonder. This is the Valyrian circlet that you've given me as a bribe before for her fostering. I have hired a smith from Essos to reforge it and add whatever Dallionite I've been able to buy from the auctions of your lands before the Iron Bank decided to hoard every single bit of it. At the top of the circlet, where it morphs into a crown, are circles of spacing where I've inserted almost 100 jewels. This is for Myrcella to be given once she comes of age. You will give it to her. I don't understand why you are doing this, my lord. Why make all this effort for her? Asks the young lady of Harrenhal. Because I see greatness in you, Deliana Tully, Tywin answers truthfully. My granddaughter will be beside you all the way through, and I will not have it when people say that the Lannister beside her is dressed in pauper attire. The silence that follows is almost deafening as the girl looks back at him incredulously. Seriously, you expect me to believe that? No, but I thought it would be funny. Now let's come to the real reason why I hand that piece of priceless treasure to you, says Tywin, leaning forward. I want to be able to buy some Dillionite from you before the Iron Bank gets their greedy fingers on all of it. The Lady's Manor, the temporary residence of Deliana Tully, till the renovation of her fortress. Lord Victor grunts in no small amount of relief as he finally is able to enter the familiar quarters that he has been working on for so long. Unlike his liege, he and Dragon Shit, alongside the rest of the Unsullied army, did not waste their time on the festivities of the capital. There is, after all, much work to be done here back home. As a green man, he has no need of the overlarge feasts. What greater joy is there than serving the will of their Messiah, and it is her unbidden will that everything they've built here be running properly. Plus, someone also needs to look after the finishing touches of the soon-to-built home of Deliana. Dragon Shit, on the other hand, returned in order to train the pathetic levies that made up the bulk of their soldiers in this campaign to the standards of an Unsullied. Deliana, after all relayed to them her worry that their gathered forces together does not count much against the mighty armies of the great houses. For now, they would make up for their lack of quantity with quality. Victor, however, plans to purchase more slaves soon if he plans to increase their population. There is still wide areas around Harrenhal and its domains, and there is always room to grow. Currently, however, he is frowning as he reads the reports from the mayors. Apparently, the daily tax of the faith has come and the Septons are demanding money from the different towns and homesteads. Seeing that a large number of their population are from Essos and has zero idea about the Andal religion, it is causing some minor conflicts. He makes a note about it, though, on his personal notebook. He will need to talk to Lady Deliana about this before making a decision. Now, what type of messaging system can be an improvement other than the blasted ravens that these people so rely on? Red Keep Royal Quarters. Myrcella is almost dashing as she packs up the little doodads and personal effects that is important to her on the medium-sized bag at her bed. She had received beforehand a letter bearing the seal of her father and that of her grandfather, urging her to pack up her personal effects, things that she'd miss. She is apparently going to Harrenhal with Lady Deliana and her entourage to be fostered there till her first moon blood. The reason, however, for their discretion is the simple fact that the Queen Mother won't allow it. Thus, to avoid the ruckus and the trouble, she is basically told to sneak out. Myrcella has never been nervous or excited. She is, after all, going with her idol and the one person she trusted above all. She can still remember that horrifying moment when that pirate almost did unspeakable things to her. The blood, the sweat, the pain in her joints as she was lifted up to be displayed like a piece of meat. Then her savior arrived, wielding a whip of fire and saving her. She stayed with her, keeping the horrors of the past away with fantastic dreams of a new world, of Jedi Knights fighting the evil Sith. She always imagined Diliana as one of them. When she first slept on her own bed with no Diliana there at her side, she had awakened in a panic, feeling once more as that Greyjoy madman was lurking in the corner. She did not sleep then, the entire night. She is thankful that this later afternoon she received the message from one of the servants, and now she's ready to leave and be with her dame. A small knock at her door makes Myrcella open it with a peek outside. She lets go a sigh of relief as the form of Sir Aerys Oakheart stands there with a smile. "Come on, princess, it's time to go," he says, taking the small bag of mementos of Myrcella while holding her hand. Myrcella Baratheon never looks back to her now empty room. It would be years before she ever lays eyes on it again. At the shores of the cliffs below the Red Keep walks Deliana. If asked why she is here, she would not know the answer. It is as if someone or something is calling her here, voices of old friends, old memories. No one would usually dare to tread these dangerous cliffside, wet, dreary, and slippery. Only a fool would take a hike here. A single misstep can cause a man to slip to his watery grave. Yet here she is, the call becoming closer and closer. As she nears the waters, her hand moves like an automaton over the darkened waves. The very waters vibrate as if roaring in displeasure. She can feel it, the very thing that drew her here. A green tinge appears on the naos as the very waters bubbles as if being boiled, and with a powerful splash of explosion that is drowned out by the gusting winds that blows from the ocean. Out from the waters levitates a small girl of Dornish descent, eyes wide open, her mouth frozen in a silent scream, her yellow and red dress tinged with almost 36 stab wounds. However, it is the glowing green stone at her neck that makes Deliana's eyes widen. The resurrection stone has come back for its mistress.